have something.
That would be the coherent narrative.
Otherwise, you said
This
you
is not
go in and look
an
them across
assessment
the,
on whether
the
it's
table
truthful
and
or
be
not.
able to
I'm just
say in the
saying that
first
that
2
would make
minutes
more sense if he
whether
was
it
like,
gonna
oh,
happen or
Democrats
not.
were really posturing against
I'll
Russia
be able to tell very quickly whether or not
because they
a good
whipped
meeting.
themselves up into
A
a
good
frenzy
meeting
because they lost to me and they couldn't deal with that, so they had to blame a foreign nation. Anyway, here is Donald Trump's exclusive interview with Brett Baer. Apparently, they were releasing segments of it now on Fox News.
I'd like to focus on our country, but I'm doing this to save a lot of lives. Yeah, very severe. Thank you very much, everybody.
You like doing those things?
It's almost like a competition. It's like winning at golf. You know, they're coming in. Every question is a kill. They hope you're going to make a mistake. They're looking, and they had a field day with Biden. That's why he didn't do it.
But you're making any news there?
I don't think so. Nothing. I always go out. I say, is there breaking news? In other words, when I leave, if there's breaking news, that's a bad thing. That means they got me on something. Let's go.
After you.
He's a good golfer, everybody.
We started after a short break for a call with a world leader in the president's office on board.
You just had me in the office here, and you had a phone call with the leader from Belarus, Lukashenko, and you talked about this meeting. Can I ask you what he told you about the possibilities?
Well, I really called him to thank him. He released 16 prisoners, and it was a very nice thing. They've been trying to get these 16 people out for a long time. Biden was obviously unable to do it. Even other countries, because it's not just Americans. And he was great. He let them out, and I just called to thank him. And believe it or not, there's about 1,300 more, and I think he'll let them out, too, at some point in the very near future.
And what about his thoughts about this meeting that you're going to in Alaska?
He was very positive about it. He's friends with President Putin, as you know, very, very close neighbors. And they work together. And he thinks that President Putin wants to make a deal. He wants to stop this horrible killing. He mentioned it himself. He said it's a horrible situation. And he said he has great respect for me and for the country, but he didn't have a lot of respect for our country under a certain different leader. And I can understand that because nobody else did either.
So what are your expectations? I mean, is the goal of this meeting in Alaska to walk away with a ceasefire?
So when you talk about, my whole life, I do deals. You never know. You don't like to have too many expectations. You want it because you have to weave and bob and you don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to go and find out. I'd like to see a ceasefire. I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it, but everyone says you're not going to get the ceasefire. It'll take place on the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be but I'm not going to be happy with that. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. Now, I say this, and I've said it from the beginning, this is really setting the table today. We're going to have another meeting if things work out, which will be very soon. Or we're not going to have any more meetings at all, maybe ever.
But don't you sense that Putin comes to this table maybe in an economic pinch, and that maybe the things you've already done have put him in an economic pitch? Is there an economic side to this, as Russia hoping to open up to the world?
Well, he lost an oil client, so to speak, which is India, which was doing about 40% of the oil. China, as you know, is doing a lot. And others, I have another few countries. And if I did what's called a secondary sanction or a secondary tariff, it would be, very devastating from their standpoint. If I have to do it, I'll do it. Maybe I won't have to do it.
He's coming, though, with the thought that maybe there's going to be a deal on the economy. He's coming with businessmen and...
Yeah, they're bringing a lot of people. Over 500 people are coming. A lot of them are businessmen. And what they really would like to do is, look, we built in a short period of time the greatest economy ever. I had the 4 greatest years ever as an economy, and this is going to blow it away. We're doing well. We were a dead country. And I say this often. I'll say it loud and clear. We were a dead country a year ago, a dead country, not respected by anybody. We had inflation at levels that we had never had before. They say 48 years. I say it was worse than ever before.
So if you were to paint a picture of what perfect looks like coming out of Alaska today, what does that look like in your mind?
Look, it's not for me to negotiate a deal for Ukraine, but I can certainly set the table to negotiate the deal. And our next meeting will have President Zelensky and President Putin and probably me. I'd like to focus on doing our country, but you know, I get these interruptions. I've solved 6 wars in 6 months when you think about it. And that's from Pakistan to India. That was going to be a terrible one. Planes being shot down. That was getting ready to flare, and then nuclear powers and so many others. And, you know.
Well, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Congo, Rwanda. In fact, did you see that Hillary Clinton yesterday said that if you got this deal done and not capitulate to Putin, that she would nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize?
If President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, that was very nice. I may have to start liking her again. I will say this. This is an important meeting. The second meeting potentially is more important. It could be more finality. It's not for me to negotiate for Ukraine, but I think I have a pretty good idea what they'd like to see and what's good and what's not good. But more importantly than the deals and all of the things we've been talking about in their lives, they've lost right now 5,000 to 7,000. They're losing a week, mostly soldiers, Russian and Ukraine soldiers. Think of this. You have Russian soldiers, you have Ukrainian soldiers. They're losing on average 5,000. Last week, they lost 7,011 soldiers and some other people where bombs were lobbed into Kiev and other places. It's something that has to stop. And I'll tell you what, if I didn't win this election, and if I wasn't doing this, you right now could be in a third world war. That was heading to a third world war, you know.
You've said before that we got a lot of BS thrown at us by Putin. What is it about an in-person meeting that makes you think he's not going to, in your words, give you BS? I mean, how are you going to trust him because you can look across the table at him?
Well, look, I've known him very well. I had a very good relationship despite the Russia hoax. It was a hoax. And that really made the relationship much harder. But I had a good relationship with him. We had no problems. We had, you know, country that we were getting along. We were doing fine. We have tremendous potential. You know, Russia has very valuable land. We have tremendous potential to have a great relationship, a great business relationship. But we couldn't do it because of the crooked, demented people that created the phony Russia. And I told him, I said, you know, Vladimir, there's no way we're going to make a deal. You know that.
Are you going to
well,
add
I think
anything
it's
or
going
just
to be
let the
tough.
video
I said,
play?
no, not
That's
tough.
your
It's
president
impossible.
talking.
Because
Shut the
I
fuck
have
up.
wise guys that created a phony deal, and until that settled up, that
You
was
shut up and
the
listen.
hoax, the big hoax, the greatest. Well, one of the greatest hoax. I think we'll talk about all by the same group of very, very bad Americans.
Vladimir
I'm
Putin
gonna
invaded
be nice
Ukraine
when I
because
say
of
it
the
that way.
Russiagate conspiracies.
But we have a potential to do some very good things at this meeting. One of the
like
things,
the proper way to analyze this is to say Biden postured aggressively against Russia because of the Russiagate hoax, but he can't even get that. His brain is so slop and his statements are so sloppy that he can't even like make a coherent narrative out of
Vladimir
it.
Putin. So there has to be some sense that you have going into this that you're going to have something. Because
That would be the coherent narrative.
otherwise, you said
This
you
is not
go in and look
an
across
assessment
the,
on whether
the
it's
table
truthful
and
or
be
not.
able to
I'm
say
just
in the
saying that
first
that
2
would
minutes
make more sense if he
whether
was
it
like,
gonna
oh,
happen or
Democrats
not.
were really posturing against
I'll be
Russia
able to tell very quickly whether or not
because they
good
whipped
meeting.
themselves up into
A
a
good
frenzy
meeting
because they lost to me and they couldn't deal with that, so they had to blame a foreign nation over and over again, and then they whipped themselves up into a frenzy and like postured too aggressively against Russia, which then caused Russia to be fearful and invade Ukraine or some shit, you
next
know?
week. So we're going to have a second meeting. Now, it could be
I
that
can
if
message
this
better than
meeting's bad
him
enough
for him.
that I'm gone.
1986, Reagan walks away from Reykjavik with Gorbachev, and it was a strong moment. I mean, you could foresee if it goes down a bad path, you get up and walk away.
I'm not doing it based on history, based on anything else. I'm doing it based on a deal.
Uh-oh,
if we
there's
make
movement.
a deal, great. If I see that there's no hope of making
Wait, they ended it
a
early?
deal, I'm out of there.
There's
It's
an hour
over.
and
I'm out of
30
there. This
still
isn't
that
my
remains.
war. This is Biden's war. This is Biden screwed this up, just like he did with Afghanistan with that horrible retreat. And the way he did it, I'll never forget it. That was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. Well, this is Biden's war too. This is a war that should have never happened. I saw it for 4 years. It didn't happen.
Trump hasn't been doing semen retention techniques. He busted too early.
Apple of his eye. Ukraine was the apple of his eye.
He
There was
busted
no
too
way
early
he
and
was gonna
busted too
move on it.
hard.
I'll tell you, you have a very similar thing with President Xi of China and Taiwan. But I don't believe there's any way it's going to happen as long as I'm here. We'll see. He told me, I will never do it as long as you're president. President Xi told me that. And I said, well, I appreciate that. But he also said, but I am very patient. And China is very patient. I said, well, that's up to you. But it better not happen now.
These guys, both Xi and Putin, have said things before that they didn't live up to, or they did other things. And, you know, when you were campaigning, you said, we can solve this right away, 24 hours. You got into it. You've explained it's much more complex. It's
For
tougher,
those
right?
asking, what does it mean that the
So I
conference
thought this
ended
would
earlier?
be-
Or the
I
press
settled
conference
6
happening
wars.
before it was supposed to, when they are supposed to have
Recently,
another hour
like
and 30 minutes? I have
Congo
no
going
idea.
on, this
I'm
was
going to be
with
very
Rwanda,
honest
it
with
was
you.
going on for
I don't know what this
31
means.
years, and I got it
I
settled.
genuinely don't
We
know what
have
this
it switched.
means.
Take a look at
I don't know.
Cambodia. Take a look at it, so many. And the most difficult ones turned out to be easy. The easiest one, which should be this one, turned out to be the toughest.
And that's because of Putin?
Well, it's because of a lot of things. They don't get along very well. I mean, President Zelensky and President Putin did not get along. Again, I inherited this. I came in. I got very angry at people yesterday. I came in.
So you were
and I said,
wrong in
"What
your
the hell? I
assessments? Are you talking to
inherited this
me? I
mess.
made no
I inherited a
speculation.
mess from Biden with the economy, with
I've actively
inflation,
said from the
with
start,
high
I don't know
taxes,
which way
with
this
so many
goes. I
other
just
things.
don't know
You
if
said
we'll
that there could
get
be very severe consequences if
a
Putin
real
doesn't do a ceasefire, if this
ceasefire
falls
commitment.
apart. But you've also in the past said that sanctions you don't think
and I hope I'm wrong.
really affect Russia because he's gotten around him before. What does severe look like?
Severe. Let me just tell you one other one. Cambodia, Thailand. It was starting. It was, and I got it right at the beginning. But many people are dead right along the border.
Oh my God,
And I
brother,
happened to
shut
be
the
to one
up.
of the
Oh
two
my
parties.
God. Oh my
I said,
God. Oh
Are
my
you guys
God.
going to war again? Because they've been fighting for, as they said, 500 years. I said, how long are you fighting? Said, 500 years, on and off, right? I said, this is not good. I got that one solved. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to have a meeting today. Hopefully it'll be good. If it's bad, if it's something I don't see a future in, I'm a deal guy. If it's something I don't see a future in, I'm gone. I'll leave. I don't have to do a press. I'll just say,
It's
not
happening
gonna
very
be a
fast.
deal.
Press here
I'm
for
outta
Trump.
here.
Putin joined presser. We're
And I
told to
go
get
back
into
to the
seats quickly
United
and that it
States,
could begin
and I
in
preside
10
over
minutes from now.
the
This is earlier than
economy that-
expected. Both
wait till
podiums
you
are
see
set
what's
up.
happening with all of this. You know, we have trillions of dollars pouring in. Even people that were against tariffs only because they didn't understand tariffs, they didn't even know what a tariff was. You had economists that didn't even know what a tariff was. They're all my biggest fan now. They're also, you see it. We have an
What?
economy that's
You
gonna
had
be
economists that didn't
best
know what a
ever,
tariff
I
was.
think,
Is
in the
so
history
funny.
of our
Only
world.
Trump knows what a
Land in
tariff
Air
is.
Force One. It sends a different signal. It's a pretty good way to travel. And we're going to land in this base in Alaska that's going to have a lot of military equipment there on the ground. It's pretty impressive.
Well, I think people are going to be impressed, and I hope your cameras can look at it. It's a very big base, and it's got a lot of great equipment. We have F-22s. We have the B-2 bomber that everyone saw. How about that? 36 hours back and forth.
We don't
Not
know if
a
it's going to be
screw
a
was
joint
loose,
presser. Who knows?
Not a plane
Who
went
knows?
down, even from a mechanical standpoint. If you take a look at the last raid into Iran,
My
it was-
prediction is Russia gives Ukraine back the territory in exchange for NATO membership. Yeah. Yeah, Russia withdraws its troops from Ukraine and then says Ukraine can join NATO. That's what's going to happen.
It sent a message, and that plane is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. But when you land, you'll see the B-2s. You'll see, I think the most beautiful fighter jet in the world is the F-22. You're going to see F-35s all over the place. It's a big base. You're going to see lots of equipment.
Oh, you're saying Russia
and
joins
NATO.
NATO.
Cameras can cover it because it will be very impressive.
Mr. President, thanks for the time. Thanks for the ride, and we'll talk to you on the way back. Just deplaned. We're in Alaska, Air Force One here on the ground. Just minutes before President Putin is scheduled to land, they rolled out the red carpet, literally the red carpet, and a number of B-2s and F-22s here in Alaska. All right, on the ground here, breaking tonight, just word now from the press room as you look there live that the meeting has ended. After 3 hours, the meeting is ended, and we're hearing that the press conference may be imminent. You see the backdrop there with the two podiums pursuing peace. They have called the press pool into that room, which is on the other side of this base, and they are getting prepared for what seems like an imminent press conference. This is a lot sooner, about an hour and 10 minutes sooner than we thought. There was going to be some downtime. There was going to be a little bit of space in between these. This seems like they're doing this a little quicker. Jackie Heinrich's on her way over there. In the meantime, let's bring in our panel. Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman, co-host of The Five. We also have the Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired General Jack Keane, and host of Sunday Night in America, Trey Gowdy. General, let me start with you. The thought that this is moving a little bit quicker. You heard the interview on Air Force One. We expected this news conference maybe in about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. It seems like it's moving a little bit quicker now as they get reporters in place. Your thoughts about this? They clearly were behind closed doors for about 3 hours.
Well, I think the fact that they spent that much time together is a good thing. There's a lot of issues to discuss, and they were discussing them. And I think, this is very different, the way this president operates. He operates from the top down when he's doing negotiations. Usually it's a step-by-step process at lower staff levels to identify the issues and try to resolve them. And then when you bring in the principals, a lot of things have already been resolved as a result of that. But the president has enormous confidence in himself, in his ability to feel out an adversary or a counterpart and make judgments right while that's taking place and make decisions. And we've seen him do this time and time again. And he's obviously much more successful at this than he has setbacks, for sure. So I think what we're going to see here is likely something positive, given it lasted that long and there's a joint press conference. And that's what we're all hoping for. Certainly the people of Ukraine want to see that as a positive result. And I would imagine if there really is going to be a next step, there's a lot of real detailed work ahead in terms of what that next step is, and also that would likely bring, as he has advertised more than once, President Zelensky, you can't
Alaska.
make a deal about Ukraine's future.
This is a joint
without
press
President
conference. I assume a
Zelensky
positive
sitting at the
announcement.
table. So
Yeah.
And he said
If it is actually a joint press conference, because they're not going to
like
take out one of the podiums.
And let's dip
Right?
into that room.
Like they
Jackie
set it
Heinrich's
up
just,
in preparation for a joint press
there.
conference, so who
Jackie,
knows?
Kind of got the red alert that this was the time, right?
Yeah, Brett, we were moved
But I
as
assume it
the press
is.
corps into these seats and told that this news conference could begin as soon as 10 minutes away. That was about 10 minutes ago, and it happened pretty suddenly. As far as we were aware, the expanded bilateral lunch that the president was supposed to have that included the Secretary of Treasury, the
Russian
Secretary
Defense
of
Minister says
Commerce,
he's in an
the
excellent
Chief of
mood
Staff,
following
Wiles, and
meeting.
also
What the
Defense
fuck?
That had not yet happened. As far as we were told, the president was still in that 3-on-3 meeting that included Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, and then also on the Russian side with Putin, Lavrov, and a foreign policy aide. And we were told by the president that if things were not going well, he was going to call this off, send Putin home, and address the press alone. So, of course, when we were hurried into our seats, we were watching the stage to see if a second podium came down. It has not. And we had a gentleman come out and just do a sound check in Russian at the second podium. So we expect to see both leaders here. But of course, it is in advance of the timeline that we were expecting, which just might be a signal that the president got through the items that he cared to talk about and maybe was not going to entertain the long list of other things that Russia had on its mind, namely economic partnerships and different agreements where the U.S.-Russia relationship could move forward. The president has made pretty clear that his main objective today is to get a ceasefire so that a second meeting can be set up, because Ukraine has made clear that a prerequisite for a second meeting is a ceasefire. And the president told reporters on Air Force One today he was not going to be happy if he didn't get that. So we expect to hear from them soon, but this was a very quick movement. And
video of Trump and Putin walking out of the meeting. Okay, let's get the body analysis here. The restricted format talks between President Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump have concluded. Putin looks happy. Where's Trump? I mean, yeah, it's going to be secondary negotiations are going to happen, but who knows if this means that there will be a cessation of hostilities or not in the interim. I don't know what Donald Trump gave up in exchange. I don't even know what Putin gave up, if he gave up anything at all. It's great. Okay, that doesn't mean much. How did negotiations go? Wait, what did he say? Calling it now, but in an alternative timeline where America joins Russia and both invade Ukraine, then World War III starts with everyone jumping Europe, including China, or they just exchange puppies to sign a goodwill. Rate my prediction. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good. He just said, duh. There's supposed to be another meeting. The Kremlin says the short format meeting is over. They are supposed to do another one, but it's not clear if that is happening. Siluanov and Belarus are meant to be in that, and they're in the front row waiting for the presser. So there was the short form meeting that was supposed to take place until 4:30. That was cut shorter, an hour shorter specifically. And then there's supposed to be another second meeting with a larger group of people. And I don't know. I don't know where that goes. I truly don't know. And I don't know why we should speculate at this point, because obviously it's going to happen in a second. There is a bill,
by the way, a Senate bill, and you're signed on to it.
I'm one of the original co-sponsors. Over 80 senators co-sponsored.
Now, the White House is not buying into that yet because they want to control the situation. Is that fair?
I think the White House is working with our majority leader, Senator Tham, closely on when to unleash that. But there's good cooperation between the White House and the Senate on that sanctions bill.
So when you look at this, getting ready to come out, the two leaders, what do you think, not knowing what they said behind the scenes, but heading in, they had to have some framework that they were looking for?
Yeah, look, I think the president, and your interviews were great, congratulations, but I think the president has been very clear that this is a table-setting exercise with the threshold issue, a ceasefire. So whether or not they got the ceasefire or not, I think is going to be really important. I was actually pleased to see Secretary Hegseth here, the NATO commander, the Supreme Allied Commander, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, because if there's going to be a ceasefire, those are the experts you need to see how you would lock that down. But that's the important threshold issue, it seems to me, with the president. And then, you know, then he talks about if it's not, we're going to have severe consequences. I think the fact that he's talking about severe consequences, you know, I was on Air Force One right when the president landed to greet him. But, you know, he talked about, hey, we will move to severe consequences, and maybe secondary sanctions on China could be coming if this isn't successful. So I hope the threshold issue of a ceasefire has been reached. And if that's the case, this is a very successful summit.
We're getting word now from the pool. It could be 5 minutes. The two leaders coming out. You'll see it obviously right here on Fox News Channel. Senator, thank you. Stand by if you would. Harold Ford Jr., I want to get you.
It's a joint press conference. It's official. The Kremlin says Putin and Trump will hold their press conference soon.
What we're seeing right now.
First,
the Alaska summit was meant to start with just Putin and Trump one-on-one. Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will join Trump.
He laid out,
they turned it into, instead of a one-on-one meeting, they turned into a 3-on-3 meeting. And now they're doing a joint press conference.
Able to end this war.
Is it going to be live? Yes, in a second, in a minute.
He said he could end it immediately. Here he is now, just less than 9 months into his administration. And we're about to I believe, as General Keane said, here's something very positive. I think Senator Sullivan's saying the same thing. I think the audience that will be most intent and most closely listening to this evening, Brett, will be the Ukrainians. They're obviously are not there tonight.
Where at any moment, President Trump
channeled through President Trump, and you have to think something positive, something meaningful. It's unclear to me. It's going to be said tonight. It's unclear to me if President Trump has been able to mute or lessen the ambitions of President Putin, who, as we all know, seeks to.
Based on everything I've seen so far, it probably went really good for Russia. I doubt that there is any sort of significant concessions that they agreed to, especially because the conditions that are set forth are determined by the battle lines, and on the battle line side, Russia is winning. Russia has hardened its positions in eastern Ukraine and is now slated to take over even more territory militarily, leading up to this conversation. So, for that reason alone, I don't think that they have. I mean, they have the leverage.
Yeah, Brad, I can tell
Part of the reason why I also feel this way is because Donald Trump has actively talked about how Russia could take all of Ukraine. Like he's soft launching territorial concessions over and over again, claiming, Russia could take so much more if they wanted to, but they're not. Saying, this is not removing himself from the equation, saying, I don't need to stop this war at all, but I'm doing it for the Ukrainians, a war that Biden started, a war that Zelensky started, making it seem as though no matter what he gives to Russia, it's actually still at the behest of the Ukrainians, even if it's going to be something that the Ukrainians didn't want, objectively did not want. Why are there 37,000 people here on a Friday evening? I don't know, because an incredibly consequential meeting of two foreign adversaries has just taken place, and this could potentially.
He was trying to get Congress to stay engaged. He was also sending a message to Putin in that interview. Here's just a piece of it.
And Trump, he said that I want to be in the middle. Otherwise, I will not put these guys at the table.
And is he right?
I want to be very honest, I want really him to be more at our side. I will explain why. Because it's not just that the war began somewhere between our countries. The war began when Russia brought this war to our country, and they're not right.
I've actually interviewed President Zelensky a number of times. That was after his contentious Oval Office meeting with President Trump and Vice President Vance, about a year later, but we were on the front lines before that. General Keane, as the Ukrainians watch this moment and the two podiums, what do you think is going through their minds?
Yeah, they're probably saying a lot of prayers, frankly. When it comes to President Zelensky, he's always wanted to meet with Putin. And Putin's never wanted to meet with him. And I believe, in the early stages of this so-called summit,
yeah, okay, that's
there
cap.
was some thought that the three leaders would meet together. But Putin did not want Zelensky participating in the initial meeting. Trump did not
that's
insist
just not
on it
true.
Because he still felt an in-person meeting with him and Putin, following on to the several phone calls they had, would be an important ingredient, and there was value in it. And it certainly wasn't.
Why are you watching Fox?
Losing.
Because I'm going to switch over anyway, but you need to understand what the enemy is thinking and what the enemy is saying.
By then, saying that basically a victory for President Trump would require him to walk away with an unconditional ceasefire. That word unconditional, hugely significant, Tom. They say if there are strings attached, that would be a victory for President Putin. So
also because I'm a conservative, I'm an American patriot. I'm an American patriotic conservative. I'm a reactionary.
Have to say, is this announcement one of process, or is there a real agreement that has been reached? Will there be a second meeting? And of course, the big question looming over all of this, does President Trump acknowledge that it is President Putin who is the aggressor in this case. That is what Democratic sources say they would like to hear from this president. This is, of course, a conflict that has divided the Republican Party. Some 51% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the war in Ukraine. Remember, he promised to end this in 24 hours of being elected. He has acknowledged it's proven more difficult than even he anticipated. So this is one of the biggest tests of his second term, Tom.
Christian, stand by for us. We are getting some new reporting. This coming from the Kremlin announcing this in Russia, that the news conference of the president of Russia and the U.S. will begin shortly. I want to go back to Peter Alexander. We see him there in the screen in front of the two podiums there. Peter, my question to you, I know you have trouble hearing because it's loud there. Do we know if the American press will be allowed to ask questions at this news conference?
Tom, it's a good question. We don't have an answer to that one yet. In fact, this came together very quickly. We did anticipate a news conference. It wasn't clear that both presidents would be here, though that was the initial expectation. Now the Kremlin has announced that Vladimir Putin will be here alongside Donald Trump. I was just speaking to some of the top White House advisors if they could give us any topics. They basically said, just wait. A Russian advisor to the president moments ago telling reporters when asked what happened behind closed doors, he said, you'll have to wait to hear for yourself. So there is certainly a lot of anticipation about the way that this is going to play out right now. One in particular occurred there, whether they were able to come to some agreement on a ceasefire, whether the topic of, in the words of the president, divvying up Ukraine did come up, even though European allies and Ukraine itself have urged President Trump not to discuss that very topic without Ukraine in the room. So, in effect, we are right now in what Donald Trump, in TV terms, would describe as a cliffhanger. We wait to see exactly what happened here, specifically as it relates to those meetings. And certainly, as we've been listening to a lot of the Russian reporters here, including those from state television, they view this perhaps in much wider terms, beyond just the topics of a ceasefire, a potential peace deal as it related to Ukraine. They view this more broadly as an opportunity to restore a strained relationship between the United States and Russia, between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin themselves. So we will anticipate with you what happens, and we'll certainly have a lot of questions we want to ask both presidents. Whether we get that opportunity remains to be seen.
Peter, before you go, because we can see from the wide pool shot where you're standing right now, you seem to be kind of close to the front row, at least from where we're looking. Can you see which members of the Trump administration or cabinet members are already there, and or the Russians, or have they not arrived just yet?
Yeah, there are members of both delegations here. They're seated in the first rows on each side. Some members of the Russian delegation and of the American delegation. Notably, none of those individuals who were inside the early meeting that took place today, lasting more than 2.5 hours, are present for the U.S. That's the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. They are not here as well. The expanded bilateral meeting, what was supposed to take place over lunch, was to include some of the top advisors economically for the president. The Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary. They were among those who were expected to be in attendance. But to this point, we don't know whether there was in some form an abbreviated expanded bilateral, or if they're just coming from what was a 3-on-3 meeting with their interpreters before arriving here. Tom, to pull back the curtain a little bit, this has been a remarkable day. In more than 13 years of covering the White House, I have not seen security like that, which we have witnessed here today as the American and Russian reporters were welcomed onto Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson. They each went through separate, in effect, vetting where they were swept to check for any equipment that wasn't allowed to be brought in, any weapons or anything of that kind. And one of the Secret Service officers heading up that process said to me that this was a much more meticulous process than you normally see. So meticulous that as we waited on buses to enter, there were literally Secret Service agents who were opening up each of the pre-prepared lunch boxes, breakfast boxes that were being brought in for those individuals who would be inside here, just to check them so that nothing was snuck onto the property here before today's meeting take place. If we look around this room, I would tell you there's probably a couple hundred individuals here, certainly a full contingent of House, the president on a daily basis. There are dozens of Russian reporters as well, but there are also reporters from all across the world, all of whom obviously would be impacted by the potential of any agreement of any kind as it relates to this 3.5-year relentless war after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Tom?
And I do want to ask you about the reporters in the room, Peter, because explain to our viewers here, are most of the people that are in that room reporters? And how, in a news conference like this, a bilateral news conference, will people get to ask questions opened up to questions, right? Because any reporter on any part of this globe would want to be in there right now asking those two men questions.
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that every reporter that I'm seated around certainly has questions prepared. I'm sure there'll be a cacophony of voices as they all try to get heard by the president here, trying to get his attention. President Trump, when he holds news conferences regularly, does it a bit differently than past presidents, where he just sort of picks and chooses and calls on individuals as he likes. Whether or not there are some
both Trump and Putin do a similar press conference style. Let's just say
there are some opening statements, and I think that's where we will all be listening very closely to get a better understanding of what, if anything, was agreed to, what came of this private conversation, what it means.
The only difference in this situation is that even like the Trump dick riders and glazers also still hate Putin, so they might actually ask some contentious adversarial questions in Putin's direction, with the exception of like Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, who will probably stand up and say, Mr. Putin, you are so handsome and I love you. Like the opposite of what he did to Zelensky.
Right now. So there's just so many topics and so many questions, not the least of which relates to the killing, the deaths that have taken place across Ukraine over the course of this 40-plus months. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, certainly tens of thousands in Ukraine.
MAGA fucks with Putin, they hate Ukraine? No. A lot of those reporters, even at like Fox News and shit, you're not paying attention if you think that like Fox News is pro-Putin. Fox News is not pro-Putin and not pro-Russia at all. They literally actively, every time they talk to Trump, they actively have to walk him off of saying incredibly kind and pleasant things about Vladimir Putin. Members of the media are also still very much invested in Russia is a foreign adversary that needs to be attacked. So I could totally see them asking contentious questions to Vladimir Putin if given the opportunity. I can't speak on the Russian media team. I don't know what their situation is with respect to Trump. Like, I don't know if they would ask him any adversarial questions. I doubt it, but who knows? Also, come on, man. This was supposed to fucking happen already. What's going on?
Much earlier than we've expected.
They're teasing us, bro.
I don't want to lean too heavily on precedent here, but despite the best efforts of the White House to lower expectations about this meeting today, they got ratcheted back up by the president's comments on Air Force One, suggesting he'd be very upset if there wasn't a ceasefire to announce today, and by the stagecraft of this event. This is not some small meeting to set up a larger meeting, Tom. This is very clearly something that has been amped up by the president. The fact that Vladimir Putin is still here, that there are two podiums, that they're coming out, does suggest there's some positive development. I want to key in on something that Peter said, because I think this could be the delay that we're in right now. The president said earlier in this week that Zelensky would be among the first people he would tell if there was news out of this. That could very well be what's responsible for this delay right now.
Yeah, the president could be calling the leader of Ukraine, who is right now fighting a war, a wartime president, to let him know of any developments. I do want to bring in the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, who has a tremendous amount of experience in bilateral meetings, in meeting foreign dignitaries, including Vladimir Putin. Ambassador McFaul, what do you make of what we've seen so far? We were told possibly the meeting could be up to 7 hours long. It was less than 3 hours. We're awaiting this news conference. I know it's all speculation at this point, but what do you think's happening behind closed doors?
Well, I'm just speculating, but I have been in these meetings with Vladimir Putin and President Obama. Sometimes the small group meeting goes longer. So the one that they just had goes so long that the larger meeting with the full delegation gets squeezed and maybe in this case canceled altogether. So that could be happening. I know the people in that delegation. I see the Russian delegation right now. I see Kirill Dmitriev's head. He is sitting right in the front row. And that suggests to me that the press conference is going to happen before lunch or there's no lunch because he was supposed to be one of the delegates in the wider meeting.
Yeah, Trump is announcing that he's arming Russia instead of Ukraine.
Bad outcome or a good outcome.
We got to even the playing field. They're buying so many of our weapons, folks. Are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy? Witkoff is in the building.
Ambassador McFall, I'm going to tell you, it looks like we have Steve Witkoff, special envoy, who's done a lot of the negotiations with Vladimir Putin. He actually had the meeting that was the meeting before this one that essentially set the table so this could happen here in Alaska on U.S. soil. It looks like other members of the cabinet are going to be making their way inside right now. Ambassador McFall, what is a victory for the United States, but maybe more importantly for Ukraine to come out of this meeting?
Well, I'm glad you phrased it that way, because summits are supposed to be about what's good for us, the American people, not what's good for Putin or Trump individually. And I think the way we should measure success are our American security interests advanced as a result of this meeting. And in my view, we have a security interest in preventing Putin from dominating and annexing territory in Ukraine. So that's what I'm going to be focused on. Have the president advance that ball, because he put a lot of work into this meeting. I mean, literally a red carpet for a imperial dictator who has, not since Hitler.
Putin says Donald Trump gets to have a Trump Tower in Donbass if he concedes to legal annexation, legal recognition of annexed territories. He gets to have a Trump Tower in the LPR and the DPR. If he builds Donbass Riviera, if he is allowed to build a land bridge and take Moldova, the entirety of Moldova, Transnistria and Moldova is given to Donald Trump. He just gives him the territory. Trump Tower in South Ossetia, because why not? Yeah. That is the kind of shit that, like, Trump is down with, though, if we're being real. Trump Hotel in Crimea.
And I think President Putin just keeps calling his bluff. If he wanted to get tough, if he wanted to signal that he was going to be more coercive, which in my opinion he should have done before the summit, not after, there are three things he could do. One, he could seize Russian assets, billions of dollars of Russian central bank assets that are sitting in America. He could do that overnight. Two, he could sanction all of the ships of what they call the shadow fleet that ships that oil out of Russia. Right now, we haven't done that. And three, he could sanction all of the Russian banks that provide the services to allow those exports to happen. He could literally do that on Monday if he wanted to show Putin that he was serious.
And you think from the delegation that the Russians brought here, investment advisor.
5D chess incoming. Trump arrests Putin on the spot. At the end of the press conference, tells Russia complete surrender or you're not getting Putin back. Zelensky says he doesn't need more bullets. Mr. President, we don't need more bullets. Only one you put in Putin's head. Yeah, we're back. Complete American domination.
You're there.
Trump takes the Russian war economy, ramps it up so that they could advance on China.
Negotiate an end to the war with the Ukrainians. They've met from time to time in Turkey, was not part of the delegation. And that suggests that Putin wanted this to be about U.S.-Russian relations, with Ukraine just being a part of it. It looks like, if they're not having that bigger meeting, that it was just about Ukraine. And I think that...
This was funny. I saw this. Mike Singleton, senior executive at NBC Universal. I think they're going to arrest him. Mark Halperin predicts Trump will have Putin arrested today in Alaska for being a war criminal. Note, Halperin's record of predicting in advance what's going to happen with the Trump administration has been remarkably accurate.
This question, a serious question. What's the % chance that the United States arrests Putin today? That's what I'm looking for. Dan, what's the % chance they arrest him as a war criminal? Zero. Sean?
Zero.
Okay, when it happens... We'll post this moment. And I'll just say before we take your questions, we to the two-way tonight is on the 2028.
Wait, do you disagree? Yeah. Do you disagree?
Oh no, I think they're going to arrest him. I think they're going to arrest him.
I've never, and I mean never, seen a more insane take. Oh my God! If this were, I mean, the chances of this happening are. I feel like is less likely than, I guess nuclear weapons are fake. Yeah. I feel like the chances of this are less likely than Trump just completely ceding Alaskan territory to Russia. Fuck it. Give Alaska to Ukraine. I feel like that's higher likelihood.
I think that's the whole thing is to trick him to coming to the U.S. and going to arrest him. He's a war criminal.
Even his co-hosts don't believe it. First of all, so is Benjamin Netanyahu, dude. What the fuck are you talking about? And Trump literally gave him a suck job in the middle of D.C.
That he is. But
yeah. So let's see. But we may do. My point is, we may do a special report. Just we'll see this weekend. That's one thing to look for is if we decide to do a special report because they've arrested Putin. All right. Let's go to your.
Says you, buddy. Welcome to your second Russia take. Yeah, my predictions have been wrong. My big predictions have been wrong. I'm not in the predictions game anymore when it comes to Russian affairs. Okay, both parties are unreliable and also insane. So it's, I think, very difficult to speculate. I got the analysis was good, and I got a lot of the broader outlines correct in terms of like where this would head and whatnot. But let's be real, okay? When it comes down to it, if this is a moment where these two guys are the ones making the decisions, it's very difficult to predict.
So for President Trump,
I don't think that's the case, though. I don't think that. I do not think that Donald Trump is going to arrest Vladimir Putin.
Can do things that other presidents cannot. That certainly will be put to the test here. So much at stake.
What the fuck is taking so long? They're arresting Putin. That's what's taking so long. Oh. Movements.
Along with Steve Witkoff as well. The envoy who sort of set the table for this meeting has been traveling really around the world to both Israel and trying to establish peace there, but also Russia. Somewhat freelancing in the role. It kind of goes wherever the president wants to send him. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, his role transforming, spending a lot of time now at the White House as a national security advisor. These were the two men that were part of the U.S. bilateral meeting, the initial meeting that was supposed to take place, that we believe did take place. We saw sort of the pool spray, if you will. That's when they gave us the first images of those people sitting together. It's unclear what meetings happened after that. We believe it stands to reason that the lunch was scrapped on the schedule because of the timing of all this. It was kind of fascinating.
There we are in the future.
It was less than 3 hours. The Russians had talked about possibly 5 to 7 hours. That being said, President Trump can come out here and say they had a wonderful lunch. They had several meetings and they've made some agreements. But that's the big question. What have they agreed on? What did they come to terms on? And what does it mean for the people of Ukraine who have lost tens of thousands, who are still fighting so bravely and who have sent their men of all ages to fight against the Russians, whereas the Russians themselves have taken about 20% of Ukraine and have called on North Korea and even their own prisoners to fight this war, even asking North Korea for ammo and weapons as well, as the U.S. has sort of had a back and forth with Ukraine over those weapons as well. No doubt Ukraine could not fight this war without the help of the United States. Kristen, if I still have you here, the relationship between President Trump and Vladimir Zelensky has evolved over the years. It looks like this is about to start. We see President Trump and Vladimir Putin. Let's listen in.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We have very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, "Good afternoon, dear neighbor. Very good to see you in good health and to see you alive." I think that is very neighborly.
Oh my God, why does Trump look so happy? I feel like he loves him.
Kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the U.S. island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military
last time he
aircraft
talked
and
about the
other
historical
equipment.
relevance of a country, he invaded it, okay? I'm just saying.
Dangerous and treacherous route over the
Last time he talked about the historical relevance of a country,
However,
of sovereign
the pilots
territory
of both countries did
that
everything to
has
bring
deep
closer
ties
the
to
victory.
Russia.
They risked their
Well, that
lives
was
and they gave it
Ukraine.
all for the common victory. It was
Bye-bye,
just in the
Alaska.
city of
Bye-bye.
Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are two flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well, there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots are buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and
They're
foster
announcing
mutually beneficial and
a
equal
joint
ties
invasion of Ukraine.
at this new stage, even during the hardest
He's
conditions.
going to say, now the real Nazis
It
are
is
Ukraine.
known
I
that
convinced
there have
Trump.
been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they have fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue. Naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work, and this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone, and Special Envoy of the President, Mr. Witkoff, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots, the primary causes of that conflict. And we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible, and our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, at the border between Russia and the U.S., there was a so-called international date line. I think you can step over literally from yesterday into tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
And I hope that we'll succeed in that in political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then, that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound, and I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all. But we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax. But what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. But we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss. But especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed. And President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much. And we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So nothing happened. Nothing. It was even worse than I thought. It was just him glazing Putin.
A long way from whatever they.
So we have just been watching this news conference between President Trump and Vladimir Putin, and it is strikingly unclear what, if anything, was accomplished here. The president saying there is no deal until there is a deal, saying they have disagreed on some major points, but they've agreed on other points that he's going to call NATO now. But this is quite incredible. Under the banner of pursuing peace here in Alaska on U.S. soil, Vladimir Putin's first trip to the U.S. in nearly a decade, it is unclear what they've accomplished. It is unclear what they've agreed on. And more importantly, it is unclear what this means for the people of Ukraine that are currently fighting a war against Russia that has invaded their territory. Peter Alexander was in that room there. Peter, you know, they were dropping sort of some nuggets here and there, but it's really unclear what they've agreed upon. Putin spoke a lot about a cooperation with the U.S., possibly in trade, in space, in high tech.
What is happening?
A lot of platitudes were discussed, nothing concrete. What is your takeaway from what we just heard there?
Hey, Will, can you hear me?
Well, first of all, this is one of the very few times, Tom, I think we can say that the President of the United States had few words. How many times have we seen him where he took questions for hours and hours today, not taking a single question from reporters in the room, leaving unanswered a series of questions like, is there any ceasefire that was agreed to? It appears clear that there was not, at least from him saying there's no deal until there is a deal. He said there has been significant, as he described it, progress that's been made. A couple things are striking here. You'll remember the president earlier today, as he was departing Washington aboard Air Force One, said he was not going to be happy if there was no ceasefire reached. He would be willing to walk away from this without a news conference and fly back home. Obviously, he stuck around, but it doesn't appear that he came away with what he was hoping to come away with. What is still up in the air is what this means for Ukraine. I was struck by what we heard from Vladimir Putin, who in effect said that they had a series of conversations, and among those things that need to be addressed are the origins of this war, in effect blaming Ukraine for this war. I think most would agree, all should agree, that this was a war started by Russia, but it's unclear if Donald Trump supports the idea of an independent, sovereign Ukraine next door to Russia, why he would trust Vladimir Putin to stop the killing of soldiers and civilians alike. There are so many questions that remain unanswered. It's not just the future of Ukraine that remains up in the air, but ultimately its impact throughout that region. We're going to be working our sources right now. We are told that the reporters who were traveling aboard Air Force One have already been rushed out of the room gathering.
Bro, this is the most bitch-made thing I've ever seen. The situation is more dire. America is like, dude, Vladimir Putin literally came to the United States of America, took his cock out and said, suck it. And Trump gave him a blowjob, only to turn around and get nothing out of this equation at all beyond glazing Putin. What the fuck? I mean, so far, that's what it looks like to me.
Quite literally zero details. And the president himself, though, at one point saying that thousands of lives will be saved if this deal is accomplished. But again, we have no idea what's going to happen. It sounds like he's going to go to NATO and go into, I guess, the Ukrainian president and maybe talk about the terms of the deal and come back. But it's unclear. I do want to bring in now moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker. Kristen, you've interviewed President Trump several times. You've covered these bilateral meetings just like Peter. You've been in the room. Look, if we start to read what's happened so far, a lot of the meeting was scrapped. It was shorter than we thought it was going to be. There's a news conference. No questions are taken. And now both leaders are on their way back. to, you know, Putin's back to Russia, President Trump back to D.C. What can we read from all this?
This is an extraordinary turn of events, Tom. Peter laid it out well. The fact that this feels rushed, the fact that we just heard from both leaders, and yet it's very cloudy in terms of what exactly was discussed, what was accomplished. They offered few, if any, specifics, Tom, and they took no questions. This is a president who relishes taking questions. The Russian president relishes taking questions when he holds his annual news conference that can last for hours on end. So the fact that this was so clipped, the fact that you heard from a somewhat muted President Trump underscores that he is not walking away from the ceasefire with a ceasefire agreement that he was hoping for. Remember, those were the terms that he laid out at the beginning of this day. That was how he was defining victory: an immediate ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire. We did not hear the term ceasefire uttered. We didn't hear any end to the fighting talked about. And that really was the goal to this meeting, and to get a second meeting. Will there be another meeting with President Zelensky? I'm starting to get some reaction, Tom. A European source telling me this was a big nothing burger. A Republican ally of President Trump saying it's a very good start, but not providing any details. And a Democratic
okay, we got to watch
source
Fox.
saying it's
We
really
got to see the
unclear
spin.
what exactly happened here. So I think the broad reaction.
Putin come out and
Trump
address
said he could go to
the press
Moscow,
first.
brother.
And
What
we
are you
on
talking
US
about?
soil here, and that left the media scrambling to get their headsets in. Usually, it is the the leader of the country, the host country of a summit, that speaks first and addresses the room in their language. But Putin started right off in Russian, and we all had to get our headsets on and listen to him rattle off this diatribe about the history of the U.S.-Russia relationship, making some allusions to something that
Even
we didn't
Fox
get many
News is
details
cooking him a
on.
bit.
But
You hear
also, without knowing the full background of it, there was something that he said that was a little bit alarming, I thought, that seemed like some of the things that he has done in the past, setting up false flags and that kind of thing, saying that we hope that Ukraine doesn't do anything to sabotage the progress that we made today, knowing full well that Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire unconditionally for the last several months, and it has been Russia that has not agreed to a ceasefire. That was President Trump's main objective today. And when we did hear from the president, he said, we didn't get there, but we think that we can. So a lot of questions remaining for the President, Trump, not just about what was discussed in that room and what might be happening now, but also how that all happened back there. It was just very unusual, atypical, and I think we're all awaiting, the readout, because the way that it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say, and got his photo next to the president and then left. Of course, that is only the piece of the picture that we have right now, and certainly President Trump, who is the host and who is the president, would not want to, I think, enable something that would make him look weak. But we are eagerly awaiting to hear the background on that. And I will also note that we didn't see any sort of scowls on the faces of the likes of Steve Witkoff or Secretary Rubio or any of the other members of the U.S. delegation. And I think had it been concerning, we might have seen something there. But just to paint a picture for you of in the room, how it felt, what we're wondering about, what we need to know to put the pieces together and fully understand what we all just witnessed.
Yeah,
Right.
I guess you have great sources, and so does a lot of people, and we'll try to put this thing together. The other thing is, it's really not between the U.S. and Russia, as you know, Jackie. It's between the U.S., it's between Ukraine and Russia. We're almost listening to say, is there a chance, is there a path to a ceasefire? And if not, the president's going to make evaluations from there, because he said
definitely
serious
more
sanctions
likely now.
coming after and the arms are going to continue to
fuck?
flow. And so, therefore, if Vladimir Putin thinks he's steamrolled or thinks he's got a victory, if a victory is us with more sanctions and more arms, that doesn't look like a victory to me.
No, it certainly would not be. And the president has noted rightfully that the tariffs that he threatened on secondary sanctions on big purchasers of Russian oil like India and China that really drove Putin to the negotiating table, that would drive Russia's economy from bad to worse. And the picture really inside of Russia is very bad. They are having to give sign-up
Trump is
bonuses
not
to join the
speaking like he's gonna
military
do
that are
secondary
larger than the
tariffs to
average
India.
national.
I'm just saying.
The average salary for across the country. They're running out of people. They're running out of cash. No one will buy their debt. There are any number of data points that you could reference here, and so certainly the president holds all the cards. But there were some things that Putin said that are always cause for concern. When he references things like root causes,
I know.
It's always a reference back to his ultimate goal of taking all of Ukraine. And so we'll see, though, of course. We got more out of Putin than we did from President Trump, and I expect that we'll get the full picture when he talks to Sean Hannity. Very, very grateful that he is going to be giving the full readout here soon.
Jackie, you're about to get a flow of information, so I'm going to let you gather that. So I appreciate it. Meanwhile, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo joins us now. Last time they met, he was there. Mr. Secretary, your thoughts about how little we know at this point?
Yeah, Brian, that was different for sure. Different than most of the pressers that President Trump has, where he's usually very straightforward and very forward-leaning and sharing all the things that he can. Clearly, he felt in this instance to deliver on behalf of America, the best thing to do was to be quiet. I don't think we should overread that. I would also urge everyone watching. I'm sure the Russians are already out with a series of statements. They'll come out with more. Pay little attention to what they actually say. What we ought to all focus on is what they do in the coming hours. Will there be missiles flying tonight in Ukraine? Will the Russians continue their advance? What will the Ukrainians do on the ground? I'm sure President Zelensky will get the briefing from President Trump on what actually took place. But will we see a de facto ceasefire, at least for a little while they try to, I want to make sure I get President Trump's words right, to try and iron out some of the things that still remain to be figured out. But I agree, pretty non-transparent, much that we don't know.
Right.
That does suggest there are significant roadblocks along the way that remain.
Mr. Secretary, I didn't go to KGP school. I couldn't get in. It was probably the Russian language that stopped me. But it looks as though they've been listening to the president. If in 2022 I met with President Biden, he essentially said, and I said it doesn't have to come to a war. We don't need these hostilities. But he didn't seem to care, so we had a war. So blame President Biden for that. And he also went on to say there wouldn't have been a war if President Trump had been president. That's exactly what President Trump feels. Also, they went out of their way, even before the summit, to establish in the past how America worked together in World War II, putting roses on your monument, symbolizing U.S.'s role in defeating Nazi Germany. He also went out of his way to talk about this has been the lowest point in the Cold War, but we have so much in common. Look, we're neighbors. You want to read into that a little bit?
Only this, Brian. Putin gets the joke, right? He is trying diligently to snuggle up to President Trump. He knows that President Trump holds all the cards that can bring his nation to near ruin. That, by the way, that read of World War II, I've heard from.
He glazed Trump
so many times is laughable.
and attacked Biden. Who gives him? Trump is giving him everything.
Good actors in the aftermath of World War II, to say the least. The Soviet Union destroyed so much and did so little for its own people. He also defended the Christian church. I mean, it's really quite laughable as well. But he hit all the notes he thought would matter. I think that is a misread in some ways. President Trump, while he said we have a great relationship, has been incredibly tough with respect to Russia, far more capable of deterring Vladimir Putin than Joe Biden or Barack Obama.
America's fall as the international superpower, the hegemonic superpower, is not even going to be like a graceful exit.
I just want to bring it to the one point. You know that you had a long
it's just happening at an alarming rate that I previously could not have fathomed, could not have imagined.
Said this of significance.
And it's like Trump is just truly accelerating it. He really is the great nation builder for China, and I guess for Russia as well.
Just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. But we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there.
So, you know President Trump. You know his body language. What are your thoughts about what he means?
I think there's still significant sticking points along the way. They may have identified interests that they can work their way through, perhaps on economic matters and the like, but it sounds to me like sort of the central issue, the thing that we've all been talking about for the days leading up to this, Vladimir Putin's willingness to conduct a ceasefire with no conditions so that they can get to the table and discuss a formal resolution of the conflict. It doesn't sound like Putin showed up today ready to concede that core point.
Yeah, we didn't get there, is what he said, but we have productive meetings. I'm going to call NATO. I'm going to call the EU, European leaders. I'm going to call Zelensky. So he does have something to say, right? And soon we're going to get that, what happened and what didn't happen.
Oh, yeah, he has something
and then
to
we're going to
say.
have evaluation. It's just very different not to get that from the press conference.
Yeah, in a matter
Bro,
of
they're
hours,
having such
we'll
a hard
have
time
figured out
spinning this.
precisely where
They can't even spin it because it was so devoid of nothing. And it's like one of the worst possible outcomes, because then all you've done at that point is just like show good favor to Vladimir Putin. And that's it. And you got nothing in return for it other than Vladimir Putin saying Biden was responsible, and also I would have never invaded Ukraine if Trump was still president. That's it. That's what Trump got in exchange for bringing Vladimir Putin to America under the auspices of like a ceasefire negotiation that literally, by his own admission, did not come to a reasonable conclusion at all.
There should be another meeting. I was kind of interested to get your take when President Putin recommended a venue. Watch.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you.
I think that caught him by surprise. Your thoughts?
Yeah, probably so. I'm sure President Putin would like to show up with the remaining fighters that he can still fly, and the Russian bombers, just as the Americans flew over the meeting today. Putin would probably like to return that favor and have a home and away game. I think President Trump will be pretty smart about where the venue for the next meeting, and I think it'll be important that President Zelensky be at that meeting as well. I'd be very surprised if President Zelensky, Trump, and Putin all met in Moscow. That would surprise me quite a bit. Who knows?
And a lot of people are going to talk about this. Jackie Heinrich points out, in tradition would have it, usually the home team gets to speak first. Vladimir Putin spoke first.
Yeah,
but with the president's unorthodox way of approaching everything about the presidency, I would look into that.
Zelensky. They bring Zelensky over, and then they kill him. Vladimir Putin gives Donald Trump the weapon to kill
President Trump, correct?
Zelensky with. And he's like, come on, do it.
Diplomatic niceties are not something that's going to offend him. I think also he likely wanted the last word. I know when I was in meetings like this and there was a readout, I always wanted to be the last one to clean up anything the other person may have said that didn't ring true to me. I imagine President Trump wanted to keep that prerogative so that if President Putin said something that he found either incorrect or needed to be fixed, he'd get that last word. He certainly got that today.
Mr. Secretary, check your text messages in your email. Let us know when you get some detail, and we'll have you just bump right in. Thanks so much for being our expert.
Yeah, because you want to get the last word.
Meanwhile, 22 minutes after the hour, let's bring in Fox News contributor Kellyanne Conway, Jason Chaffetz, as well as Fox and Friends weekend co-host Charlie Hurd. Kellyanne, I'll talk to you. Your sense about the fact that we did really not get any details from that press conference. Why?
Look, I think anybody who's confused about how this went down is still wondering what happened at the end of that final Sopranos episode. This is exactly what President Trump said was going to happen. He said it's not his deal to make. Putin is killing innocent people in a sovereign nation. He invaded that nation, and the country that is being attacked so viciously needs to be at the table to make the final deal. The second thing the president promised and delivered upon, Brian, is that this meeting would set up the framework for the next meeting. And it is not always the case where one meeting leads to another. We've all seen President Trump be one and done. I think in addition to the art of the deal is the art of the details. And I know President Trump is going to get back on Air Force One tonight. He's not going to go to sleep at all the entire ride. We already know that. And he's going to expect everyone around him.
He's going to be kicking his feet up thinking about how Vladimir Putin,
the structure and
his ass,
and what the details should be like. And I think he's going to talk to Zelensky again. He's going to talk to the other European leaders again. Look, everything came up Trump in the U.S. today. This was his meeting on U.S. soil with U.S. bombers ahead. Mm-hmm. Look at the step and repeat behind them. It says pursuing peace. Do you think Vladimir Putin wanted to stand in front of a banner on U.S. soil a foot shorter than the U.S. president in front of words that say pursuing peace? That's the goal here. But that's President Trump's
brother,
goal.
are you serious?
And the last thing I'll say is, Putin, I disagree completely with who said he's got cards to play. He got the first word,
Bro, they're
the
libs
first
now.
statement. I think today
They're
the most
fucking libs.
important
They're libbed
word
up.
to get
They're
was
libbed
the
up the
last
wazoo.
word.
This
and
is
President
crazy.
Trump was crisp and concise. You know why? Putin treated him like they're friends. Oh, the religious artifacts. Oh, you're looking so healthy and vibrant. Donald Trump was not being his jovial, jaunty self in this press conference. It was not emotional. It was transactional. And I think it's because Putin knows Trump can crush Russia's economy with primary sanctions like he's done before and these secondary sanctions for countries like India and China who are buying Russian oil. I think it's a huge win
this is
for peace
worse
today and a
than
huge
I
win
thought.
for our president.
Yeah, and when we get details, I'll know.
Okay, this deal, this fake deal that wasn't a deal at all is literally even
Jason,
worse than we previously thought.
Your
If this is the
thoughts about what we know
spin,
so far, they both
the
came
spin
out.
is
I think that's actually a good
wow.
line that Putin
Donald
had
Trump
and why they
made
laughed.
Vladimir Putin look short in comparison in front of a banner that says "Pursuing Peace."
No kidding. I think it's a huge win for President Trump, for the United States. There is but one superpower in this world. It's the United States of America, both militarily and economically. You had the visuals on the military side, but both President Putin and President Trump talked about the economic strength. I also don't think this is all about Ukraine. I think they probably had a discussion that was much broader than that. I think this has to do with China. I think it has to do with Israel. I think it has to do with where Vladimir Putin...
You think they talked about all that?
I think they do mention that. I don't think they go 3 hours
or do you think
with
focus?
maps. Well, because I think they actually go through and they want to talk about all of these places on where Russia is in the world. And we can push Russia around, because if Donald Trump decides to turn that knob and say, you're no longer going to be a participant in the world economy, then you're going to fall apart. That's why President Trump holds all the cards.
And that's why John Radcliffe going, don't you think, Jason?
Yes.
John Radcliffe going is important
Howard Lutnick.
because he knows what's going on in Russia. He has the intelligence. So he says, listen, I know what he's telling you, Charlie Hurt. Radcliffe could say, but I'm going to tell you the reality, what's really happening in Russia, and the CIA knows.
Yeah, and I think the big reason we're all kind of reeling right here is because
we know nothing.
Yeah, well, we know nothing, but also we're so accustomed to Donald Trump taking all these questions. The president never misses an opportunity to take questions, and so we're sort of like confused by this. Right now, normally, under normal circumstances, we would be 1/8 of the way through a reeling press conference where he answers every single question.
It's amazing. Dude, they're trying desperately to spin this around into like a positive, and there's so nothing. There's so much of absolutely nothing, nada, zero, that they're just like, yeah, Trump looked hot on stage. Of Vladimir Putin, I bet he felt bad after he nutted in Trump, you know?
This summit, which President Putin described as an agreement and one that he didn't want to see European
Trump
leaders
actually
interfere
didn't want
with.
Vladimir
What
Putin to
comes
call
out
him
of
an
that
Uber
call,
after
what set up
he
the next
nutted
stages
inside
this
of him.
conflict and the discussions
You know,
to end
that's
it.
like normal.
All right,
That's
Garrett,
actually a
Garrett,
power
thank
play.
you. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more coverage.
That's a real power play from Trump. Yeah, he wanted the nut. Oh my God, this panel is like the most freakish panel of all time. John Bolton, Rahm Emanuel, what the? Oh, CNN is busted again. That is how John Bolton actually sounds, though, low-key.
Really got what he wanted from Trump. And if Trump had been irate, he would have called things off. Putin has gotten to him. I think that's very clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just thinking back to the beginning of this, Putin walking off the plane to a round of applause from the President of the United States, Trump was a very eager participant in resetting this relationship, the personal relationship between the two of them.
I'm gonna keep it
And if there's
$1.50.
anything
Like
that
the
comes
whole
out of
second
this,
meeting will take place in Moscow. Second meeting will take place in Russia is a crazy statement. And then and of course, like Trump is on the spot there, but it's wild that his response is, "Oh, they would get mad at me, Vladipoo. They would get mad at me if I were to do it, Vladipoo." We basically have zero information but some clues. No ceasefire announced. Putin alluded to a great meeting and warned the EU and Ukrainians not to torpedo whatever proposal it is he put forward to Trump, which he would actually agree to. Clearly, this didn't mean EU/Ukraine red lines, and that's why Trump kept saying he needed to call them after the meeting to see that it is potentially acceptable. The second meeting is supposed to have Zelensky. You understand? That shit ain't happening in Moscow if Zelensky is showing up.
we're going to start new talks on the future of nuclear weapons. That would have been something, a headline. He didn't even get that.
Yeah. Well, it's also what he said, there's not a deal until there's a whole deal. Back in Cold War days when there were Soviet-U.S. talks, they would refer to bilateral issues between the U.S. and the Soviet Union and regional issues, conflicts in Africa, conflicts in Asia. I think Putin may have gotten back to that, and Ukraine's a regional conflict, but he was talking mostly about bilateral issues. And if so, I think that's a big win for him.
And there is a little hint of that. I saw some video with the Russian ambassador who was interviewed quickly by a Russian reporter, and they were talking, it was very hard to hear him, but he said basically they made some issue on visa issues, which would be part of the relationship. It's so minor, but getting them back into the embassies, restoring the relationship, visas, etc.
Stuff that for 3 years has been off the table. Stuff that for 3 years has been,
reestablishing the relationship has nothing to do with Ukraine.
The U.S., the economic piece of this, all the potential that was there that was supposed to be held kind of back, that may be where the progress is because of the U.S.-Russian relationship. And Ukraine is basically kind of still in that treading water with no progress, which means that's not good for Ukraine because he slipped the noose on the sanctions number 4 time, and he gets to continue his war unencumbered.
I'll tell you what, it's clear why there was a delay in them coming to the stage, because you and I both know, and you don't know as well too, Ambassador, they were spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to spin a nothing burger into filet mignon.
The media attention for John and Carolyn got a lot worse when they got married.
There's a kind of frenzy because everybody.
Break. This is nutty, dude. This is some real ass nutty ass shit right here.
So what are your expectations? Is the goal...
Yeah, Trump told Brett Baer before the meeting, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of ceasefire.
Of this meeting
well,
in Alaska,
now we know. That was an abject failure.
With a ceasefire?
So when you talk about deals, it's all I do my whole life. I do deals. You never know. You don't like to have too many expectations. You want it because you have to weave and bob, and you don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to go and find out. I'd like to see a ceasefire. I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it, but everyone says you're not going to get the ceasefire. It'll take place on the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be but I'm not going to be happy with that. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. Now, I say this, and I've said it from the beginning, this is really setting the table today. We're going to have another meeting if things work out, which will be very soon. Or we're not going to have any more meetings at all, maybe ever.
So what are your expectations? Is the goal of the...
Should I have Turkey at the table? Yeah, true. I think Trump's top envoy, Steve Witkoff, who was in the 3-on-3 meeting, entered the press conference room, took a seat, and then abruptly left minutes later. Oh, shit. Bro saw his ex and immediately fumble everything. He is just like me. Bro went from no ceasefire means I'm going to be upset to no ceasefire and the second meeting will be in Moscow, which means, again, whatever the Russia wants, I guess. Yeah, Brett Baer said that a Putin interview was potentially in the works, but it's not happening after the rescheduled press conference, probably because Putin already nutted too much inside of Trump. So he's like, I can't nut anymore. I'm out. I guess Sagar's assessment here is the most hopeful, most optimistic one, but I don't think so, especially because who knows what those red lines are going to look like. I also don't think that Trump has ever, this also implies that Trump gives a about red lines that EU could have set here or red lines that Ukraine could have set here. When has Donald Trump ever given a shit about whatever red lines the European Union has wanted, whatever demands that the EU has made? The idea that Donald Trump is just not revealing the outcome of this ceasefire because he's waiting to call European leaders to get permission sounds insane. We didn't get there. U.S. President Donald Trump says no deal, but progress made after Ukraine talks with Vladimir Putin. Trump says many points were agreed with Putin, but a few remain, including one he describes as significant. Putin calls out European nations out to torpedo progress as he talks with Trump were thorough and constructive. I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many points that we agreed on. I will call it NATO in a little while, and I will, of course, call President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. Yeah. The White House officials state that the luncheon between the U.S. and Russian delegations have been canceled, adding that President Trump will immediately return to Washington. This, by the way, is why it was odd to agree to EU-Ukrainian red lines in the first place. The U.S. president should only consider his own red lines ahead of a major diplomatic summit. Yeah, I don't think the Trump administration gives a f about whatever the EU and Ukrainian red lines are. What are we talking about? It so far looks like a spectacular failure. One that is actually unique because it's like you're used to Trump dominating global leaders, right? You're used to him bitching them out, having them come to the White House, sitting there as he like chirps on endlessly about, I don't know, transgender athletes or something, right? This was Putin doing that to him. And you just saw it. Like, and for a guy who cares so much about the aesthetics of domination, compare Donald Trump's meetings with like Keir Starmer, Macron, Merz, and any number of different world leaders versus the meeting that he just had and the press conference that he just gave with Vladimir Putin. He was the one in the bitch seat. And this is something that he cares about. He cares about not looking like he's being dominated. It's maybe the only thing he cares about. So I don't know. I just feel like it's pretty crazy that he was like even smiling through the process when it's like very obvious that the deal didn't go anywhere. He started off with a smile and everything.
President Trump says we're not quite there yet, which is the bottom line.
Right, and that whole area has not been conquered by Russia, so why would Ukraine give up the most valuable piece of land that they've worked so hard to hold on to since they've been attacked since 2014? Ed, thank you so much. We'll look forward to more details in your analysis. Joining us right now, former Ambassador at Large Nathan Sales, Fox News contributor, Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen, and Christian Whiten. He's a former State Department senior advisor. Mark, we don't know a lot, Mark Thiessen, about what took place, but reading between the lines, what have you concluded?
Well, if they had not had a press conference, then that would have been a sign that the talks had failed, because Trump said if they don't go well, I'm just going to walk away and that's it. If they had taken questions, it would have meant that they were in agreement. And they didn't take any questions, so they seem to have split the difference. Appeared together, so the talks are alive. But even within what they said in the prepared statements, they were disagreeing, because Putin said, we've got a deal and Ukraine better not throw a wrench in it. And Donald Trump said there was no deal, that there were some things that were agreed on, some big things that weren't agreed on, but might get agreed on. So, you know, even there, without even taking questions, there was some daylight between what the two of them were saying. So we don't know the answer. I expect President Trump's going to get on Air Force One and start making those calls, because Air Force One's a lot more secure than the air base in Alaska, and we'll see what the word comes from the Europeans as to what they've got.
Nathan Sales, a good point. I mean, we saw last week when Steve Witkoff thought he had one conclusion from his conversation with his counterpart when they met over in Russia. And then by the time the week ended, we had a different readout about what they agreed on. So now, again, we have a little difference between Russia and the U.S. from the same meeting. So what do you read from it?
Yeah, no surprises there. Vladimir Putin is a trained KGB spy. This is his bread and butter, sowing confusion. Look, I think if you look at Vladimir Putin's statement, there's a couple of reasons to be concerned about his willingness to seriously consider ending the war. First of all, there's no ceasefire. If there had been a ceasefire, which the Ukrainians have agreed to months ago and which Putin has been tapping us along about, if we'd had that, they would have announced it. They didn't, so still a lot of work to be done there. And also pay attention to how Putin described how the war started. He's talking about Russia's security interests and root causes. Let's be clear. The root cause of this war is Vladimir Putin. He could end it today if he wanted to, and he doesn't want to because he thinks he can win it on the ground. What his goal is to take back all of Ukraine, to neuter it as a sovereign and independent state. And why does that matter? Because if you don't have Ukraine, you don't have a Russian empire. And that's Putin's endgame. He wants to reconstitute the Soviet or Tsarist empire, the collapse of which he has said was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. He still thinks that. Right. He's going to keep fighting, I'm afraid.
Okay. So, Christian, there's no doubt about it. He wants.
No, he said that about the USSR's dissolution and the collapse of the USSR, and he was right about that. No, that doesn't even matter, though, because he's not trying to recreate the USSR. He wants the Russian Empire.
Hey, by the way, we're neighbors. We're 2.5
If
miles
he has any capability of doing so is, of course, an entirely different question.
Ukraine, don't get in our way.
But
so clearly he's posturing there, right?
having said that,
No,
having
I think
said
that's
that,
actually a good objective to have, because the Europeans are a problem here. They are the ones who are encouraging Zelensky.
these guys are
to continue with the myth.
these
that
guys
he's
are
going to
talking
get
about
all of
this
Ukrainian territory back, including Crimea, which
while trying to also simultaneously glaze Trump, and they're failing to do so because, like, the American State Department position broadly, or American foreign policy position broadly, is being antagonistic to Russia. But Trump as an individual is antagonistic to Ukraine.
The reality is there's no compelling United States interest at stake here. There's a continent called Europe with as many people.
So on the one hand,
an economy as large as
on the one hand, they're trying to present this as like a good thing that took place.
When you see the day start in Europe coming up,
But on the other hand, they're just like they're still left with commentary that says, like, you know, Trump's best friend Vladimir Putin, that he obviously clearly loves being around, is actually bad.
That's why he brought businessmen along. I'm not sure that'll work, but I think we have a recipe here, unless the Europeans are willing to see reality. And one last point on the economy, we've been hearing a lot of talk about how Russia is about to collapse. The ruble is up 50% this year. Unlike the United States, they actually have a central banker, Elvira Nabiulina, who is good at her job. Russian economy isn't growing much, but it's growing a little bit. And Russian oil exports, yeah, India may be off if they do decide to chop some of their purchases because of Trump's tariffs, but that can always go to China or Brazil or somewhere else. So I'm not really buying the Russia on its heels argument here.
Yeah, I disagree with you. I think it is in our interest to back up Ukraine. In fact, now suddenly Republicans, and thanks, I'm going to bring up Mark again, but now Republicans, according to the latest poll, are up 9 points in support of Ukraine, and 74% of Republicans now say Ukraine should get more arms.
I told you, see, Brian is a big, like, continue war with Russia guy. And I think there are some people, like the guy who just kicked off the conversation there abruptly, as you noticed. There are some people who are unironically either genuinely invested in, like, ending this conflict.
I didn't interrupt you, Christian. I didn't interrupt you, Christian. Stop talking. There are people who are literally robbing grocery stores for butter so they can sell it on the black market. The only thing propping up the Russian economy is oil and gas sale. And if Donald Trump crushes oil and gas sale, the Russian economy is going to be in big, big trouble. So there's nobody pushing for a victory to the end and driving Russia out of all the territory. Everybody wants peace. Everybody wants to end this war in a stable way. And so does Donald Trump. And I don't think Donald Trump agrees with the word that Christian said there either.
All right. Thanks, guys. We can't wait to get more details about what took place behind closed doors, because both leaders have left. We just have their remarks, and we'll analyze that.
Your old shower for too long. It's outdated, unsafe.
That's really interesting. There's actually people on the Republican side that are, like, I guess, pro-Russia, or like maybe they're genuine isolationists. I don't know. What I am seeing here, however, is that the meeting was a failure. And it was such a failure that even Fox News is having a hard time.
Yeah, I think you have it right, Jake. Look, the
describing it in positive
of the
terms.
Entire summit was somewhat cringeworthy. The fact that Putin was being welcomed on American soil, the fact that Trump gave him literally a red carpet treatment, the kind he has rarely given to any, Democratic ally of the United States. You can tell that Trump thinks Putin is an equal, is this big shot on the world stage, and he's been treated by the rest of the West as a kind of pariah. I mean, he can't go to Europe because he'd be arrested. And so there was a lot of the atmospherics that were cringeworthy. But I will say, on the most important thing, at least for me, it was positive that there was no deal. I think everyone was worried that there was going to be a deal in which Trump was going to make major concessions. I don't think anyone thought Putin was going to make any concessions. The fear was that Donald Trump was going to cave in various ways, sell out Ukraine, sell out the Europeans, and he didn't do that. And so I think, I'm at least relieved. Now, when you watch it, what you saw was Putin had clearly decided His strategy was he was going
That
to
is
make
what he
no
did.
substantive concessions of any kind.
That's the reason why he's
But he
saying
was
there's no
going to
deal.
Really amp up the flattery
Because
of
I
Trump.
suspect that it's
So
like
he
everything
says
that
if
Russia
Trump had
wants.
been president, there would have been no war, which is easy for him to say now. Trump should get the Nobel Prize. He's amazing. All that, is cheap.
Isn't it
and
success
easy
in and of itself with
rhetoric
the Trump admin if
but
everyone
he
around
laid
him is
that on thick.
confusion for a couple news
But
cycles?
at the
No.
end of the day, he made no concessions. So Trump
No.
comes back empty-handed, but in a way,
I don't-
better to come back empty-handed.
I don't think it's the. I don't think is. I said that this was probably not going to come to like a meaningful conclusion. But the very fact that they didn't even have an outline that they could present together means that it was worse than expected. Fareed Zakaria is saying that it's good because a ceasefire is not imminent. I think that's bad. That means that he has no, he recognizes that he has no leverage, or at least Putin is capable of showcasing to Trump that he has no leverage. This is a major W. A major W for Vladimir Putin. He got to do like a flex tour, basically. We'll see what happens in terms of the conflict, in terms of the bombings and whatnot tonight. But it feels like there is no meaningful conclusion coming anytime soon.
If you believe that, it is important.
And also
to
on top of that, it was a
preserve
relitigation
Ukraine
of
as an
the
independent sovereign state.
leverage that
But it
Trump,
wasn't a
the leverage
disaster.
that Putin
And
has
again,
over both
I
Trump
will
and
give
obviously
Donald Trump
EU
credit for this,
and
presumably
Ukraine
Putin
and
stuck
everybody
to his
else.
guns, and Trump didn't concede. It's possible there is some framework that was discussed that he now needs to take to the Ukrainians and the Europeans, but Donald Trump tends to be fairly indiscreet. So if there is such a framework, if anything substantive was agreed on, we will know in the next hour. It is inconceivable to me that Trump will be able to keep that quiet. He will feel the urge to boast. So the fact that, at least so far, we haven't heard much leads me to your conclusion that, really at the end of the day, there's nothing to show for.
Right. I mean, he did say, just to quote him, many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. Well, we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I assume we all here on the panel think that one that's the most significant would be the ceasefire. But President Trump also said that he's now going to call NATO leaders and
He can't stop
Ukrainian
himself.
President
He loves Putin.
What do you see happening next? President Trump did talk about they would talk soon and probably would see each other again soon. There was some idea floating that the next summit might even be in Moscow, although he acknowledged he'd get a little heat on that one, although he didn't say no. What do you think happens
People don't
next?
mention this, but without terrorism,
what message
Trump
would it send
wouldn't be
if Trump were to
capable
go
of
to
secondary
Moscow?
sanctions against India. You're wrong. What are you talking about? He can just do sanctions to India directly. He doesn't need to do tariffs. As a matter of fact, I don't even think he's floating real tariffs against India for that. I think he's talking about sanctions against India. Sanctions are not even controlled by the president. It's controlled by the Treasury, and it's so easy to put together that it's become a major problem for the American government. He just says secondary tariffs. What do you mean what? You can literally go and apply for sanctions if you have enough juice and enough motion for a competitive foreign company. We apply sanctions so loosely. It's not implemented by a congressional approval or anything. That's the reason why they use it so much. They use it so frequently.
In the past, and it's unlikely to work now. What we need is pressure on Putin, military pressure through military aid to Ukraine. That's what will get his attention.
Fareed Zakaria, thank you so much. Anderson, back to you in D.C.
Jake, thanks a lot. Here with me now is Leon Panetta. He served as former defense secretary and former CIA director under President Obama, and he was President Clinton's chief of staff. Secretary Panetta, I mean, you have seen a lot of these kind of global world leader meetings, these kind of summits. Did anything come out of this? Have you seen one quite like this?
Look, Anderson, I think the fundamental test for this summit was pretty clear, that the president had to get a ceasefire. That's at the top of the list. And he himself said he needed to get a ceasefire. And that they ultimately, if they got a ceasefire, they would then establish a negotiation between Ukraine and Russia to work out the issues on territory and on security. That would have been a successful summit. That did not happen. There was no deal. There was no there. There was no ceasefire. So it's pretty hard for me to understand just exactly what was the purpose of this summit, because whatever I thought was the fundamental test of success was not achieved.
In fact, I want to play something the president said Wednesday when asked by a reporter about what would happen if this was not a successful summit. Let's just play that.
So Russia what happened? Face what any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Secretary Pineda, we certainly did not hear on that stage when the president was face to face with Vladimir Putin anything about any kind of consequences or any kind of.
To be honest, I don't even know what he could do. I guess if the options are trying to shut off every single foreign country that can purchase Russian energy to sell it to the rest of the planet as a mediator, then you're cooked. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to sanction India, China, all these other countries? I don't think you can do that. So I guess at the end of the day, it is because Vladimir Putin holds all the cards. And he's basically using the territorial, the territory acquisition, the military invasion, and the additional territories taken over Ukraine, and signaling they could take more territory from Ukraine as a way to consistently slap Trump up a little bit. And not just Trump, but just America in general. You seen any Russian takes yet? No, they're too busy popping champagne.
Putin is not to be trusted. And you've got to be tough with him. You've got to come down. You've got to implement sanctions. You've got to provide weapons to the Ukrainians. That is being tough with Putin. That's what Putin understands. It's the power of force. And Trump somehow thinks that he doesn't have to resort to that kind of tough action and that he can do it through the power of his personality. And frankly, that's not working.
Yeah, Secretary Pineda, I appreciate you.
You cannot sanction us. We make everything. We shut off rare earths to the West, and you're done. No U.S. autos, no F-35s, no Ukrainian drones. You have no cards. We make them. Yeah, no, I agree. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that what is Trump supposed to do? He really can't do anything. He's just to sit there and eat it, because there is not really. Trump is the worst possible person to have this situation come to a close. He literally is the worst guy to do this, because he can't even be he can't even communicate effectively without coming across like he's glazing Vladimir Putin the entire time. But ultimately, it just seems like America's a little more cooked today than they were yesterday.
Thought that would be a great idea. Thanks so much, Chairman Mast. I appreciate it. And great to get your analysis. I can't wait to get more details. By the way, Vladimir Putin said flat out, I expect today's agreement will be the starting point, not only for the solution to the Ukrainian issue, but will also bring us back to business and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And he went on to say they were at a low point since the Cold War. Byron York, Fox News contributor, joins us now. Byron, Vladimir Putin clearly wants to establish relations with the U.S., citing historic moment after historic moment. Was he effective?
Well, we don't know yet, but it doesn't look like it. On Air Force One, on the way to the summit, President Trump said to Brett Baer, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. Now, if the two of them came together on some form of a ceasefire, they certainly didn't tell the world about it. Now, maybe it's possible there's some sort of incipient deal that they have to run past Ukraine and the Europeans or something like that. But it's also possible that this summit was just a bust. President Trump talked about that
Fox
possibility
News,
several times in the days leading up to this, saying, well, you know, it might not work. We don't know. And if it doesn't work, I'll just walk away or we'll try something else. We'll know more very, very soon. But right now, there's really no sign that they've accomplished what the president wanted to accomplish by going there.
Right, and now he's going to talk to our allies and see what what their conclusion is after they're related. I also like the move the president had by going 3-on-3, because I think he likes to sit back and evaluate interaction. A lot of times he has his aides disagree in front of him, and if you have Marco Rubio and if you have Steve Witkoff, and then you got Lavrov across the way, and then Vladimir Putin and the former Russian ambassador to the United States, you get to see that interaction, and that helps your evaluation. Do you like that 3-on-3 instead of the 1-on-1?
Oh, yeah, I think it was a smart idea. Trump has gotten actually criticized in his first administration for one-on-one meetings that, other than translators, there was nobody there. So it is a good idea to have your top people, in this case, Rubio there. It was also a good idea to take the Secretary of the Treasury, because obviously if Putin remained intransigent, as he has been for so long, the next steps the United States would take would be economic. So Trump took his Secretary of the Treasury with him. I think that was an important signal as well. But here again, right now, we just don't know what happened.
Yeah, real quick, 30-second answer. Remember, he had another round.
I'm going to keep it a $1.50. I do think that we are officially in a multipolar world right now. That's what it feels like to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But it kind of feels like we are no longer, we are now officially in a multipolar world. You're saying cope? Okay. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. But in this situation, for this situation in particular, if it's a multipolar world and America doesn't recognize it, that means America is going to, oh, you're saying not you, Fox. That means that America is going to increasingly engage in belligerent ways with foreign adversaries that will probably draw out even more violent responses. It's a pretty bad thing? No, it's not. I don't think it's a bad thing unless America recognizes it. America is not recognizing it. That's the bad part about it. Because, like, as I said already, if America's solution here is to bring China to the table and say, like, China is a superpower, it's a global power, it's the senior partner in this coalition behind Russia, we have to all get together and draw out a reasonable conclusion in this, then that is the only effective way to stop further bloodshed from taking place. If America behaves as though it's still the hegemonic superpower, the only singular power that matters around the world, and continues like increasing the sanctions and tries to attack all of the other allies that are also non-aligned with America entirely, so they are also playing both sides, like they're playing Russia as well. They're working with Russia as well, like India being a great example. Then it's going to isolate itself further. America's going to isolate itself further. And in that isolation, as I said before, without soft power, 800 military bases go from joint security partnerships to 800 different military invasions. America is not capable of that upkeep. That'll be incredibly violent. And I don't even know. I don't even know if they were, if maybe
over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are two flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well, there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots that buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years.
Trump praised and thanked Lukashenko on Truth Social after the meeting and wants to meet him too in the future. We're so cooked.
Let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War.
I just don't know. I don't know. I actually don't know what Trump could even do at this point, outside of what I've mentioned, like bringing China to the table and rerouting the conversation through China, because without that, he has no leverage. The only leverage that America has in this situation is like what? Dissolve NATO? That's ridiculous. The Ukraine war and Israel's genocide in Gaza show we're already in a multipolar world because the U.S. can't unilaterally control outcomes. Russia, China, regional powers in the global south act on their own terms, form parallel alliances, and block Western goals. Multiple centers of power now shape global events, not a single hegemon. I mean, Israel is the one area where he has unilateral control, so it's crazy that they won't even enforce that. And I think part of the reason why they won't enforce the unilateral control they have over Israel is because they too recognize that their time is running out, so they want to make sure that Israel has maximum power and maximum leverage in the region before they are forced to shut the money faucet. They will erode every last ounce of global influence they have on this Israel shit, while simultaneously hoping that the Gulf, the GCC states that are a part of OPEC continue to abide by American interests to a certain degree. I don't know. It kind of feels like America is more of a... I haven't felt this way ever, but it does feel like America is more of a paper tiger today than ever before. And I guess in that respect, Vladimir Putin did succeed. Because this was, this was a decent blow, I think. Just judging by the optics of the situation, looking at the way Donald Trump deals with, again, Canada, and maybe even some instances Mexico, European allies, versus the way he deals with Vladimir Putin, there's a big difference there. So much more reverence, so much more respect for Vladimir Putin, if we're an adversary, than all of the allies. It feels like he is trying to reinstate his power on the global stage by just like consistently bullying the allies, knowing that they'll take it, while simultaneously, when it actually comes down to being a superpower, a hegemonic superpower, when it comes to dealing with Russia, he actually truly shows the limits of American power. You know what I mean?
Women and children and bury them in mass graves. He's kidnapped children as we speak. The reality on the ground is that...
Look at this, Cope. This is also another incredible moment of Cope. Look, we wipe Iran nuclear power plant from the map, and now we're a paper tiger. Yes, exactly. This is a limit to American power. This is a real limit to American power. Another real limit to American power is its dealings with China. Because remember, a lot of the tariffs conversation started off because of China. And China's the one that keeps getting extended. China's the one that keeps getting the delays on its tariffs. Look at the way Donald Trump deals with the vassal states that it demands more and more tithing from versus the adversaries that he is supposed to be competing and dominating. How do you not see what I'm seeing?
Countries to the EU, and they can give those weapons to Ukraine, but I believe it was J.D. Vance who said we don't want to be in the Ukraine war business any longer. We heard President Trump say that there would be significant consequences if President Putin did not agree to an end to the war at this summit. I want to play just some of what we certainly didn't hear that in this press conference. I want to play some of what President Trump did say at the press conference when he was actually facing Vladimir Putin.
Many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there.
I mean, it seems like if there were going to be some consequences or severe consequences, he could have said something to that effect to Vladimir Putin face to face.
You're absolutely right. He could have said face to face, there will be severe consequences. We'll never know, at least for right now, in the short term, whether there was any kind of threat, veiled or otherwise. But I hope Caitlin Collins is absolutely right, that the reaction around the world to this kind of optics triumph for Vladimir Putin will enrage Donald Trump, or at least annoy him enough that he will support more sales of the military. You're absolutely right. It is through those sales to the Europeans that they are transferred to
I'm not sure what
Ukraine,
Trump could have
but there
done,
has to be more
now that I think about it,
production of them
like,
in the United States,
other than just basically say, all right, well, the battle lines are the battle lines. Whatever you want, my good sir. Because, like, think about the alternative. The alternative is what? Continue giving weapons to Ukraine. Fine. That's great. That's beneficial to the military-industrial complex. I guess, like, tell Ukraine that they have to lower the age of conscription, and no assurances that that will work, you know? Because obviously the real red line that is dictated by mutually assured destruction is like actively joining the battle with American troops. Tell Ukraine to lower the age of consent. Okay. I don't know if you you meant that as like Trump being a pedophile in the Epstein files, or if you meant conscription, but you said consent instead. You mean the age of conscription. I can't tell if that was a mistake. I am messing, bro. Trump lowers age of consent in Ukraine so that Republicans finally care about it as a utopia. Yeah. Trump's like, folks, believe me, it took a long time, but we're sending Alan Dershowitz to the Ukraine. This is finally American patriots will care about Ukraine.
Today for messing with the message and talking about the tragedy of what's happening in Ukraine, even though he invaded it. So I do think that they will want to reset the message. How quickly they try to do that, how quickly they try to establish another round virtual phone call, whatever, with President Trump will be interesting. How loudly they speak out to get this done quickly, I think, will be an indication for us about about some of the details that are not being discussed publicly. It would be my guess.
Can I just make a note as we're watching the tarmac as President Trump's about to leave? And I this image, I think, really just illustrates the limits of a reliance on imagery in a moment like this. You know, President Trump set this whole thing up with the fighter jets, with the flyover, with the red carpet, to try to create a moment. And ultimately, Vladimir Putin is just pretty steel-faced about this whole thing and probably had no intention of putting any real deal on the table. And I think it is a letdown, I think, would be an understatement, but it's a little embarrassing, frankly, to see all of that on the tarmac. The show that the White House put together.
Well, the show's, to see the show over, it's like, you know, the magic of the movie has.
The balloons have all dropped, and it's
the theater lights have gone on, and you know,
but Putin got
has left the stage.
Putin got moments, plural. He got a flyover, a handshake, a red carpet.
He got a wave walking down the red carpet.
And he was told that he has a fantastic relationship. The President of the United States told him we have a fantastic relationship, even though the President of the United States did not get what he came for.
Dimitri, I just want to hear from you because we haven't heard from you. What do you think of? Did anything come out of today? What needs to happen next?
Well, I think Putin had three goals going into the summit. The first one was to embrace the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, to stand on the same stage, get the red carpet treatment. He clearly got that. But there's still a big question about the other two goals. The second goal is clearly delay any further negative consequences, further sanctions, tariffs on other nations that are buying U.S. oil. We'll see what happens with that. And the third one, to distract. I think he wanted to go into this meeting. He brought three other officials into this meeting that didn't even make it into the room. One of them is the Minister of Finance. The other is the head of the National Wealth Fund, Sovereign Wealth Fund of Russia, clearly wanting to push economic projects with the United States, whether it's the Arctic, gas deals, whatever. And I think he probably failed in that goal because I think Trump did not bite the bullet on that and did not bite on that bait and really pushed for the ceasefire that Putin had no intention of executing on.
We'll have more with the panel. I want to go back to Jake in Anchorage.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, okay, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have a lot more from the Trump-Putin.
I really do. I'm thinking about this a lot, and I just don't really know what Trump could do in this situation, or any leader at this point. What, air raid and sirens, Kharkiv? No. Are you memeing? Or are you being serious? I mean, I guess that's you have your answer if that's actually happening. Would you say that Trump isn't holding all the cards? Yeah, it kind of feels like Trump's not holding any of the cards, and part of that is not even his fault entirely. But part of that is also because he's completely eroded whatever goodwill he might have had with other allies. Air raid sirens in Kharkiv, Richard Engel reports, even as Putin is still on the ground in Alaska. Well, feels like it's not. It feels like it didn't work, really. Doesn't seem like the meeting was productive beyond. It does genuinely feel like Trump brought Putin to the United States of America, to Alaska, just to have him say, oh, this war would have never started if Trump was still president. That's it. That's what he got. That was the concession he got from Putin, which is completely meaningless. And Putin in return said nothing. We're not stopping anything. We're just we're going all systems go.
Brett Baer, in his interview with President Trump, when Trump said, look, it's not my job to go out and negotiate on behalf of Ukraine. It's to go out and negotiate for the best of the United States of America.
He's reffing. He's reffing, and he wants to make sure that the other side gets to the table, and they weren't going to get to the table unless they met one-on-one with President Trump first. So he's thought, I'll go up to Alaska, we'll do it, and see what happens. President of the United States obviously, very slowly taxiing down on the runway at Elmore Air Base. He's going to be making his way I think it's between 6 and 8 hours back to Washington. Quick turnaround, 3.5 hours. But Charlie, it reminds me, too, when you listen to Jason talk, one of the objectives of Trump's first term was to make sure Russia and China don't get closer together.
Yeah.
And he wanted to establish that relationship. Now, I know it's much more complex now, but the Russia illusion stopped that. And the president, and it seems like Russia is trying to say, I want to get back with the U.S., even though they have not earned that relationship. That seems to be their objective in their closing remarks.
Yeah, and I think going back to something Jason said earlier, I think is a very important point that we could wind up actually talking about for a long time, is that, how contained was this conversation? Was it just about Ukraine? And I think that it probably was much broader. And they were talking about all of the other ways that the United States.
That's not nothing. That's Putin saying that is a huge W for Trump. Anyone who spews bullshit for him online and television, you're wrong. Because the goal here is to get something out of the deal. The goal here, you don't make a grand entrance if you're not going to get anything out of it. You don't spell out that you're going to get a ceasefire negotiation going for weeks in advance if you're not going to get anything out of it. So the very fact that he brought Vladimir Putin here, and the only thing he got out of this bargain was Putin being like, Trump, you're awesome, is crazy. Especially because the comparison between the comparison between Trump talking to European allies versus Trump talking to Vladimir Putin is so stark that it even makes the hogs probably second guess this. And now what is he supposed to do? Because if America must maintain its superpower status, it has to continue arming Ukraine, which Trump supporters say they don't want to do, even though their attitude has changed on that now. They discussing raw earth minerals. Bish, what you talking about? I don't know. I guess maybe I was a little bit hopeful that there could be at least an outline for a potential ceasefire. So the fact that didn't even happen is really wild. Raw earth.
You probably need to talk to Zelensky, talk to NATO. Just the fact that he said in front of Vladimir Putin that he's going to talk to NATO, that's what's scary. Donald Trump has done more to build up NATO than anybody else in the world. I mean, the amount of money that's going towards NATO, the expansion of NATO, that is an unbelievable accomplishment of the Trump administration. So I think that was, I don't read into it that it was too short. If it was 10 minutes, Like Donald Trump said it might be, maybe. But the fact that they both got up to the podium, I think, bodes well.
Russia thought they'd have a 2-week war. They have a 4-year war. Russia has lost influence in the Middle East. They're now out of Syria and they lost that important port. Russia now has to deal with 2 formidable foes that added to the NATO arsenal, who are experienced, well-armed allies.
First of all, Biden did all of that. Why are you saying, like, technically that's Biden's victory, if that's a victory at all?
5% of their economy is fueled by military hardware.
What are you talking about? Now you're glazing Biden's foreign policy.
Begin to pick up speed. And if my memory serves me correct, he'll gradually get air underneath him and fly all the way home to Washington, D.C.
That is the point.
Flaps down, table trays up. More Trump-Putin summit coverage right after this. Don't move.
I can't believe how hard we've Brandonized at this point, where, like, he did AUKUS Jack is now being propped up as, like, a fantastic achievement of Trump. He Finlandized NATO. He NATOized Finland. Look at this sad man laboring up the stairs. We're waiting in the next half hour, hopefully, if Trump is on time. He's supposed to be having a conversation with Sean Hannity. Who knows if he'll actually do it, but here's some updates on that front as well.
I just was texting back and forth with Sean Hannity, who just sat down with the president, and he said the president noted that he came out and said there wouldn't have been a war if he was president, and that's what part of Vladimir Putin said at the end of his written remarks. And he also said, in a scale of 1 to 10, I give today a 10. So that's the president grading what he thought of the meeting. By all of our standards,
She's the one who said it was a flop, by the way. That's why her response is like, okay. Wow, Trump really cooked it, man. Yeah, Trump really won this round of talks by not even having any of the goals that he set out in this process. I think this is, like, I view this in the same way that I view, like, Vladimir Putin telling Trump he wants a ceasefire, and having Trump yell at Zelensky only to turn around and, like, bomb the out of Ukraine. I feel like this was another version of that, but even more damaging to American diplomacy and American power. Like, this is literally what Vladimir Putin's been doing throughout this entire ceasefire stage. He's even gotten Trump to, like, refuse to send intelligence to Ukraine for brief periods of time. And now he even went to the United States of America, went to Alaska, and turned around and is continuing along the exact same trajectory that he was doing even before he came to the United States of America. But I also don't know. I don't know what you do in that situation. Like, I don't know what a reasonable, brilliant foreign policy guy would do. Because the limitations are mutually assured destruction if America were to engage more aggressively, and also the limitations are, you're saying sanctions, but, like, we have already sanctioned half the planet. If we continue sanctioning everybody, then you're not sanctioning anybody. Do you understand? You're sanctioning yourself. If America sanctions the whole planet, then the only people that America is sanctioning is itself.
Begin that news conference. Not really a news conference, actually. 2 successive speeches with no questions. When I heard him with these 2 phrases, one, we must address the root causes of the war, and Russia's legitimate interest must be addressed. That's what Putin has been saying from the beginning. The root causes being he blames NATO, he blames everybody but himself for invading Ukraine, and Russia's legitimate interests really are reducing Ukraine to a runt of a nation, right? That's basically
freeze the Russian oligarch bank accounts. You're being very anti-Semitic, sweetie. You're being anti-Semitic. Are you telling me you want Israeli industry titans to no longer have their money? Jewish Israeli titans to no longer have their monies? Not today. Not today, friendo.
And 3, he'd like as much of Ukraine as possible to be absorbed back into Russia.
He'd like all of Ukraine. That was his intention in February 2022. It's just that he hasn't been able to achieve it, in large part because Ukraine has fought so bravely to defend itself with an enormous amount of help from the U.S. and Europe. No sign that he's given up on those long-term intentions. And the concern had been, going into this, that Putin would try to tap Trump along once again, right, using Trump's own words. Just delay it, push the negotiations out and continue to fight on the battlefield where he believes it seems that he's winning.
Yeah, and Kristen,
Why did you specify Jewish instead of just Israeli to really drive home the point that it would be anti-Semitic? But you're right. If we're talking about Russian oligarchs with Israeli passports, they don't really have to be Jewish. Still anti-Semitic, though.
They've been unusually quiet, and I think that, one, we're going to hear from President Trump. He's doing an interview, unsurprisingly, with Fox and with a friend of his, Sean Hannity, so we might get something out of that. But in terms of the White House, they aren't talking about this. Now, it's not surprising that we're seeing this from the Kremlin. They are highlighting every part of this that we discussed, which was the win for Putin, walking in on a red carpet, the handshake in which President Trump was smiling, he looked comfortable, just the fact that Putin was on
For
U.S.
those that
soil.
you don't understand, for those who don't understand the joke, I'm saying Russian oligarchs use Israel as an entry point to the rest of the globe. They almost many of them have dual citizenship with Israel. That is the joke. For those of you who don't understand the joke that I'm making.
There's a lot of fear going into this meeting among European leaders, among Ukrainians, that a lot of different paths that this could go down. One of them being that even though President Trump had said, we're not going to talk about land swaps, we're not going to talk about ceding territory to Russia, that at the end of the day, Putin might be able to convince him to agree to something
right,
as a
give
superpower.
off the Donbass region. And,
exactly,
yeah.
without consulting Europeans or Ukraine. That doesn't appear to have happened. The other part of this is that they were worried that Trump might make some serious concessions, not just in terms of land, but in terms of anything else. That doesn't appear to have happened. It does appear that they went into this meeting and they began the talks. Now, that is not what President Trump said he wanted out of this. But as we spoke about here on this panel before he came forward, this is likely the outcome.
I think it's funny to talk about like Ukraine and the European Union's involvement in this, like doing this without consulting them when they clearly have no say in this. And it kind of feels like even America has no say in this. At least that's what it looks like right now. Like, you mean European leaders in the UK and Ukraine, but America doesn't even hold the cards. It's just Putin. I don't even think Trump has a say in this process anymore. And it's not just because he's like, Agent Krasnov or anything. It just truly feels like there's they don't have any options to dominate Russia. It almost is like this long extended proxy war to cripple the Russian military has almost entirely turned on its head, and it's making America look weaker as a consequence of the gains that Russia made in Ukraine and the consistent that Russia is engaging with while simultaneously dangling a ceasefire negotiation on Trump's face. I guess the only alternative is like Biden probably would not have entertained something like this. Why do you think Israel would have to stop without funding, but not the same for Ukraine? Wait, what? No, Ukraine has no... The only reason why this is still going on is not because of like a real Ukrainian need for emancipation. The only reason why it's still going on is because America doesn't give weapons to Ukraine tomorrow. The outcome doesn't change. America continues funding Ukraine. The outcome doesn't change. It just like basically puts an extension at the timeline of Russian incursion further. That's it. Whether America continues funding Ukraine or not, it's just like, is it going to happen tomorrow or is it going to happen a year from now? Do you see what I'm saying? One phone call and the U.S. can make Ukraine come to the table? What are you talking about? Of course U.S. can make Ukraine come to the table. What do you mean? This conversation is not being held back by Ukraine. What is wrong with you? What? The reason why this summit, I think, turned out the way it did is because like Russia is not interested. It wants to continue pursuing territorial acquisition militarily. Ukraine has already conceded. Ukraine knows that they have no cards. It didn't even need Donald Trump to tell Zelensky that in an embarrassing fashion. Brother, EU is the one calling the shots. Ukraine is the leader. Yeah, Zelensky is dominating. Zelensky is the real shadow leader of the European Union, actually. At what point, realistically, do you think Russia will genuinely come to the table? I don't know. I don't even know what that table looks like if they were to come to the table.
Meanwhile, more special coverage of President Trump's historic meeting with Vladimir Putin and all the circumstances and the stagecraft around it in just a moment. You're watching a special edition of the Jesse Waters Primetime.
Here I am.
I want to know how people are going to try and spin this on like the liberal side too. I guess like I think I think the implications of this meeting was far worse than the way Americans currently understand it. I think the implications of this meeting was far more damaging for American American international diplomacy, American power around the globe. And I don't even think it's necessarily because of like Trump's sexual appetite for Vladimir Putin. I don't think it's because Trump wants to fuck Vladimir Putin or has a soft spot for Vladimir Putin. I think it's a larger problem than that. I think people will say like Russia controls Drumpf, it's Agent Krasnov, and it's a little bit of a cope. I think it's more damaging than that if you're invested in the continuation of American hegemony, you know? Surprisingly similar response from libs and conservatives at this point, yeah. I mean, even though I do think that Vladimir Putin and Trump might be having sexual intercourse, I think that's besides the point. Putin is doing it for Israel? No, he's not. Putin has the Trump P tape up his sleeve? I don't think so. Let's see.
Being realized across the board, and President Trump, I think, is just crystal clear that Putin's back is against the wall, and I think he demonstrated that clearness with his very first action before saying a word, with the fact that he flew B-2 bombers over his head.
Why was that important?
I think it was that was.
Oh my God, this is so desperate, dude. This is, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of like the sickest military parades put together by the weakest military countries around the planet. It's like watching the Egyptian military parade and going like, look how powerful their military is. Like, that's it. It's just all aesthetics. What the fuck? This is just loser talk. What do you mean? Oh, he flew fucking planes overhead. He rolled out the red carpet, man. He rolled out the red carpet. What the fuck are you talking about? He literally said he's going to go to Russia. He's going to go to Moscow. There is no salvaging this, I don't think. I think Israel is a real domestic issue for every Western country because it showcases the limits to Western democracy, right? There is an overwhelming majority of the population that wants something, but the politicians do not follow through on their desires, on their demands. It makes people realize that maybe democracy isn't real, right? And with respect to foreign policy and American power around the globe, I think the Russia-Ukraine situation has been a spectacular failure in terms of not being able to, in terms of America basically rolling up their sleeves and getting involved in this as a means to, and they openly stated this, as a means to destroy the Russian military. And all that has created is an environment where Russia didn't only dominate Ukraine, but also is seemingly dominating America and also the Western powers as well. So it looks pretty cooked.
Not an accident, obviously. For him to fly a B-2 bomber over Vladimir Putin's head, it was a signal to him that when President Trump says, hey, there could be very serious consequences, he's saying that these serious consequences can be very far-reaching. Maybe it's fires that we sell to European countries or other NATO countries that can reach Moscow or St. Petersburg or oil refineries or other things, or maybe it's other weapon systems that we make sure get into the hands of the Ukrainians. I think that's what I read between the lines of that number one action of them stepping on stage and having
vibes-based assessment is true. It is vibes-based, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but once again, I urge you to consider the way Trump treats Vladimir Putin today versus the way Trump treats the EU, leaders of European nations, Canada, India, every other country. The way he treats China and Russia, when they are supposed to be like the real adversaries, the ones he's supposed to be posturing against, or Zelensky, that's another one, you know? Like, think about the way he treats Zelensky versus the way he treated Vladimir Putin. That's what I'm basing my vibes-based analysis off of. Now, I think you either look at that situation and say it's because Donald Trump is in love with authoritarian leaders, right? Strongmen, which there's some truth to, or it's because Trump wants to dominate these guys, but he can't. He just simply can't, because he's a bully. He dominates anyone he can dominate, ally or foe. And these are simply guys he cannot dominate, even though he wants to. Trump looked weak and inconsequential. He's diminished the office of the president and made the United States irrelevant. I mean, for sure.
The European banks have frozen $300 billion of Russian money. That's a third area that President Trump could use and get that to Ukraine.
And now, Ivana, you have a situation where 51% of Republicans are now in support of giving Ukraine aid in this conflict. That's up 9 points, really, since the spring. And I think it's because they watch President Trump sincerely try to get Vladimir Putin to the table and act and just say flat out that he's been tapping him along and he doesn't know what happened to him. They did get to this point, but the Republicans saw a sincere effort to bring peace to the area, and they read the frustration through the president's remarks.
President Trump is absolutely right to show that peace through threat actually works. So he has been trying to talk nicely to Putin, but Putin really does not understand kindness. So I'm absolutely pleased that President Trump is now seeing through Putin's lies. And after all, this war in Ukraine, it's not only about Ukraine. Russia, China, and Iran and North Korea are trying to completely rewrite the global order, and this is a new axis of aggression. So this is precisely why President Trump should also go after Russia.
Absolutely, and we'll see, because the president's already spoken to European leaders, our NATO leaders, maybe the NATO General Secretary, and we'll see how they interpret what took place. But I have a source on the plane right now on Air Force One that says there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of optimism that a second meeting will get this across the finish line. I imagine that's a ceasefire and ideally a sustainable peace. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. More coverage of this historic Trump-Putin summit so we get more and more facts. Don't move.
Don't move. Don't do it. This could have been a real W moment for Trump if he was able to secure some semblance of ceasefire. But I guess Putin had different opinions. So the very fact that Trump thought that Putin was coming in with a ceasefire in mind, only to just fucking bully Donald Trump and then turn around and fuck off, is not good, I would say.
Than it was a year ago?
It's basically over, right? The $60 billion that Congress authorized in terms of direct aid to Ukraine, that's coming to an end. Intelligence support is still there, but significant shipments of military aid.
The U.S. is going to allow the EU to buy American weapons, and they can send it to Ukraine. But it's not as if the U.S. is dipping into their own arsenal.
That's right. And to buy new weapons, you have to manufacture them first, so there's going to be a delay for that.
And I think that's going to be a harder and harder pill for the Europeans to swallow. I mean, if we just go back a week, to Abi's point, that Trump sees the path here to what he wants with Putin is his relationship with Putin. But we've seen the relationship with European leaders really tatter and fray more over the past week. It was barely a week ago, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz was almost saying, we've heard for a long time nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine in the room, Ukraine at the table. He was almost saying nothing about Europe's security without Europe at the table. I mean, that was strong diplomatic language. That was when Trump was talking about a land swap. That was only a week ago. It toned down a little bit, but this myopic view on focusing on Trump is shredding a broader relationship, and European people in Europe see this, and they see their capitals dipping in their pockets to pay for these weapons when their hospitals are crumbling, their schools are failing, their roads are full of holes. The money's going on weapons, and the United States is not stepping up.
I'm sorry. This is precisely why Trump is doing it, because Americans feel the same way. I mean, particularly his base, they don't want to see American dollars going to Ukraine, even those who support Ukraine. And so this is a way for him to say, no, we're making money on this. We're not giving money, we're making money.
And Putin gets the laugh here as well, because what he wants to do is sow division between Europe and the United States. And this is what's playing out.
What incentive does Vladimir Putin have to seriously negotiate when he knows what Dmitry just said, which is essentially that the United States has stopped aiding Ukraine.
And is not going to push for Ukraine to get into NATO.
Yeah, and is not going to do that, is going to then start charging the Europeans for helping Ukraine, maybe charging them more than the costs. I mean, Putin is looking at this and is saying, these people are not serious at all about this. So what incentive?
You even said that he never cared about ceasefire and made fun of his pretending to want to stop the war. What changed? I mean, like a little bit of hope. I think hope is probably the worst problem. That's what it was. Like, it just, you know, it's almost like you get like you get hope dangled in front of you. Also, that was a little bit because of Vladimir Putin, I guess, but you get a little bit of hope dangled in front of you, and it feels worse when it doesn't happen. You know what I mean? If you've never had the taste of a delicious ice cream sandwich, okay? The strikes immediately started as his plane's wheels took off the Anchorage airport. That's why he respects me. Oh, yes, Mr. President. I respect you too. Is this how you sucked Putin, Mr. President? Okay, there you go. I leaked the script for you. Yeah, 10 out of 10 meeting. It was incredible. It was the best meeting. Many people are saying, all the European leaders called me. They're blowing up my phone. They're still calling me Sean. They're calling me hot. They're saying we're playing make-believe with like a fucking dumbass. It's like having, this is like when you have, a monarch that passes away and the fail son takes charge at a young age before they've even developed like a healthy attitude on how to rule over the kingdom. And now we're just like stuck at the mercy of this like idiotic fail son prince. And everyone has to just play make-believe. Everyone around him has to just like act like he's doing a great job. It's so sick. Amazing.
Cost him a lot. And whatever pressure that we can exert on Russia needs to be exerted sooner rather than later.
Congressman Carlos Jimenez, Republican of Florida, always good to have you on, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up next, former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger joins us live for his reaction.
Right, Putin said we're neighbors. That means Russia considers us part of their region. Isn't that sweet? Yeah, I've seen what Putin has done to one of its neighbors. Oh, man. Dude, I just want the fucking war to end, okay? I don't give a fuck how it's done. That's why I was willing to give Trump props if it did. Not that I thought that it was likely, but you mean kind of like how everyone around Biden had to play pretend? Yes, exactly like that. Except the difference that Biden wasn't making the decisions. They were still making the wrong decisions, okay? But they were not at the mercy of Biden. You think Jackson Henrique still has a job after saying Putin steamrolled Trump? Wait, Jackson Hinkledink said that? Anyway, come on, Hasan, do you really...